Chapter 272. It wasn't as if cheating had never happened before. Although it was exposed in the end and they were severely punished by the certification hall, there would still be people taking the risk every once in a while. If the Iron Bones sect hired someone and they suddenly came for a new certification today, all the disciples would turn into crooked melons. Not only would his career be ruined, his life would also be in danger. Thinking about this, Deacon Zhao's cold sweat flowed even faster, and his heart became even more anxious. Everyone. Jun Changshao said, "It's windy outside, please come in." Elder Zhen was the first to leave. Elder Zhou and City Lord Xia walked in one after another. Deacon Zhao walked in and said softly, "Sect Leader Jun, my life is in your hands, I hope that there won't be any accidents during the second certification." At this time, he wanted to kneel down and cry for the second grade. Jun Changshao didn't understand, how can there be any accidents? Deacon Zhao said, "What I mean is, please treat the certification seriously and not treat it as a game." Jun Changshao followed him in and said softly, "Deacon Zhao, if my Iron Bones sect doesn't get the second grade, will you be in trouble?" Deacon Zhao said softly, "It will be very troublesome." "I understand." Jun Changshao said, "I will definitely make the disciples treat the second certification seriously, but," he paused, "Deacon Zhao and Alliance Master Qin are very close, and Jun and Alliance Master Qin also have a grudge, this will be a little awkward." Sect Leader Jun clearly remembered how arrogant this person was in the certification hall and how he made things difficult for him. If not for Elder Ma's appearance and certification as an 8th grade sect, he would have to run to another county. Deacon Zhao's expression changed. He hurriedly lowered his voice, "Sect Leader Jun, only have an agreement with Alliance Master Qin, we are not close in private, please don't misunderstand." At this time, even if he was sworn brothers with Alliance Master Qin, he had to cut ties with him, after all, his life was at stake. Jun Changshao said, "Jun can tell, so I hope that Deacon Zhao will be more careful with the 100 Sect Alliance certification in the future." This was definitely sarcastic. This was definitely telling him to make things difficult for the 100 Sect Alliance. Deacon Zhao affirmed, "Definitely, definitely." Elder Zhen, who was walking in front, stopped in his tracks. He turned around and said, "The two of you are whispering at the back. Could it be that you are colluding to fake it?" Jun Changshao said, "My iron bone has always proven everything with my strength. I never lie." "Strength?" Elder Zhen said faintly, "You can only prove it through verification. You can't just talk about it." "Oh, shit. This old man doesn't seem to like my iron bone." Elder Zhen wasn't unhappy with iron bone. He was unhappy with Elder Zhou. In his opinion, if Zhao Xingming accepted bribes in private, he must have colluded with iron bone. Then, it must have something to do with Elder Zhou. Sigh. The infighting in the adult world was a little complicated. Iron Bone had been wronged. Because of the grudge between the two elders, he had been shot for no reason. If it was any other sect, they wouldn't mind being shot, but was Jun Changshao the kind of person who would take a bullet for nothing? He wasn't. So, since Elder Zhen was unhappy with him, he had to make him unhappy too. "Elder," Jun Changshao said, "your certification headquarters came to my iron bone for the second time. Could it be that you have doubts about the previous certification? Sect Master Jun and Deacon Zhao should know whether there are doubts or not, right?" Elder Zhen said coldly. "They didn't come with good intentions." Jun Changshao said, "You mean to say that my iron bone and Deacon Zhao colluded to fake the sect certification? We will know whether it is fake or not after the new certification." At this point, Elder Zhen's expression froze. Because he had already seen the majestic sect's main hall. Elder Zhou, who had been holding back his words, also had a look of surprise. As an important person from the imperial city, he had seen buildings more luxurious than Iron Bone's main hall. But it was rare for a 7th or 8th-rate sect to be able to build something like this. City Lord Xia also opened his eyes wide. Oh my god! Sect Master Jun's main hall was so luxurious. Elder Zhen said indifferently, building the main hall so luxurious, even if the sect's strength doesn't increase, it will only be on paper. Elder Zhen's words are wrong. Elder Zhou seized the opportunity and retorted, Sect Master Jun built the main hall so luxurious. It means that you have the ambition to make the sect stronger. That's right. Jun Changshao said, since I have established the sect, Jun naturally wants to make Ironbone stronger. That is why I built the main hall so that it won't have to be rebuilt in the future. Elder Zhou raised his thumb and said, the falling star continent lacks ambitious young people like Sect Master Jun. Elder Zhen wouldn't believe that there was no relationship between the two of them when he praised Jun Changshao like this. He said coldly, it is good to have dreams, but if you have unrealistic fantasies or take advantage of opportunities to take the wrong path, you are just deceiving yourself. Damn it! Is this guy so sure that my iron bone is fake? Good. Good. I will gather all the disciples here and test them seriously. I will show you what it means to prove yourself with strength. Jun Changshao wanted to keep a low profile, but since the other party was so sure that he was fake, he had to make a big show of it. Qingyang! He shouted, gather all the disciples who participated in the test last time and let this elder test them again. Yes! Before long, all 550 disciples were gathered in the training field. Deacon Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. These disciples were the ones who had been tested previously. Even if they were really hired by Sect Master Jun, as long as they were still here, they would definitely be second grade. Not bad, not bad. Elder Zhou praised the Iron Bone disciples. Judging from their auras, they are all good seedlings. As an elder of the headquarters, his judgment was definitely sharper than Deacon Zhao's. Elder Zhen said indifferently, although these disciples are not bad, they are at most first grade. Deacon Zhao giving them second grade is a bit too much. Deacon Zhao said, reporting to Elder Zhen, this subordinate gave a second-place evaluation after the Iron Bone Sect's disciple test. Is that so? Elder Zhen said indifferently, then let's start the test again. As he spoke, he summoned the testing stone and said, Sect Master Jun, you should know the rules. Please test the strength of the disciples one by one. Jun Changshao said, disciples, listen up. These two elders are from the headquarters of Southwest Yangzhou. They are here to test my Iron Bone disciples for the second time. Test them seriously. Yes. All the disciples shouted in unison. Swoosh. Cui Bujian was the first to step out. He gathered the spiritual energy in his cyclone and punched fiercely. This time, he was absolutely serious. He did not deliberately suppress his strength. Boom! His strength was displayed as 13,000 jin. Gah! Deacon Zhao was dumbfounded. This disciple's strength was only 3,000 jin during the last test. The difference between 13,000 and 3,000 was too big. Elder Zhou and Elder Zhen were also a bit confused. After all, 10,000 jin was comparable to a normal rank 1 martial master. Boom! The next to step out was Sima Zhongda. He punched the testing stone and his strength was displayed as 14,000 jin. Boom! 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 Li Tiantian, Yang Yuhua, and the others stepped out one after another. These martial disciples who entered the sect earlier all had strength above 10,000 jin. Until Yang Kong and the other new disciples tested. Because they had just entered the martial disciple realm from rank 12, their strength was around 4,000 jin. However, it was still much higher than the test value. Deacon Zhao's heart was in a perilous situation. The last 50 disciples were only at rank 12 in the last test. How did they all become martial disciples in such a short period of time? Boom! Jun Changshao punched again and the normal testing stone shattered again. Elder Zhen and Elder Zhou's eyes widened. City Lord Xia almost lost his balance and fell to the ground in shock. One punch to shatter the testing stone. This strength was definitely above 100,000 jin. A 7th grade sect leader could produce a strength comparable to a rank 1 wuzong. This was simply too terrifying. Elder Zhen, right? Jun Changshao retracted his fist and turned around. He said indifferently, Jun and the 550 disciples have finished testing. Do they meet the previous evaluation? It doesn't fit. Elder Zhou was the first to speak. Oh? Jun Changshao was surprised. Elder Zhou said solemnly, based on the performance of sect leader Jun and the disciples, they should be in the top 3. Top 3. City Lord Xie's body swayed and he staggered back 2 steps. His eyes were filled with shock and horror. Chapter 273. The top 3 sects could only be found in the 4th grade counties and above. That place was full of talents and experts. Naturally, their potential was limitless. But today, at this very moment, after seeing the Iron Bone disciples test, Elder Zhou's evaluation of the top 3 was undoubtedly shocking. One had to know that this was only a 7th-rate sect. One had to know that this was an inconspicuous 9th-grade county. Hearing Elder Zhou's evaluation, Mayor Xia was so shocked that his body trembled. His eyes were filled with horror. After knowing that the Iron Bone disciples were certified as 2nd grade, he was unable to control himself. Now that they were tested again and rated as 3rd grade, this was definitely a blow to his soul. I have a top 3 sect in my territory. Heavens! This was too unreal, too unbelievable. If not for his status as the mayor, Xie Guangquan would have raised his hand to slap his own face to confirm whether this was real or not. A top 3 sect in a 9th grade county. It was indeed very shocking. If this spread to the Jianghu, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. Elder Zhen. Elder Zhou said, do you have any objections to this old man's evaluation? Elder Zhen was silent for a moment, then said, no objections. Although he always went against Elder Zhou, he still had to give the Iron Bone disciples a top 3 grade certification. Why? Because there were at least 50 disciples who could produce a strength of 10,000 gene that was comparable to a 1st grade martial master. They were only martial disciples. Under the circumstances of a low-level martial master, their potential was definitely limitless. They definitely deserved a top 3 grade. In fact, if the Iron Bone disciples were given a few more months, they would be able to produce a strength of a martial master at the martial disciple level. After all, there were body-shaping pills, shaping rooms, and training pagoda. Deacon Zhao was also stunned for a while. It turned out that the Iron Bone disciples were so scary when they were serious. It turned out that he had underestimated them. Elder Zhen. Elder Zhou said, thank you for your doubts. Otherwise, the certification center would have recognized the wrong person. These words were, Elder Zhen's face immediately turned red, as if he had been slapped hard. They didn't find out that it was fake, but they found out that it was a top 3 sect. This situation was a little awkward. Elder Zhou cupped his hands and said, Sect leader Jun, we have to return to the headquarters tonight. We won't disturb you. Iron Bone being rated as top 3 was a big matter. Jun Chang smiled and said, 2 elders, my Iron Bone sect has just started. The sect's first motto is to keep a low profile. Please don't make this matter public. How could it be called keeping a low profile if he made his disciples take the test seriously? Mayor Xia was speechless. Elder Zhou was a little stunned. Even if the other sects had been certified as a triple B, they would publicize it wantonly to raise their sect's reputation. The Iron Bone sect actually had to keep a low profile after being certified as one of the top 3 sections. Jun Chang smiled and said, would you like to stay for a meal before leaving? Unable to refuse such hospitality, everyone stayed for a meal. Then, they ate until their faces were almost covered in tears. The 2 elders had eaten a lot of delicacies, but after eating Lu Wancher's food, they realized that what they ate before was just plain tea. Even a 7th-rate sect had such a good chef. No wonder their disciples were so strong. After eating and drinking, Elder Zhou waved his hand and said, Sect leader Jun, we will take our leave first. Jun Changshao personally sent them to the door. Since he was the head of a sect, he naturally had to be elegant. If he didn't send them off, it would only give people a feeling of arrogance. Living in another world, you could act cool, but you couldn't be brainless. Thank you, City Lord. Jun Changshao said, why aren't you leaving? Xie Guanquan said with a serious expression, Sect leader Jun, to be honest, I haven't eaten my fill. Jun Changshao almost fell. Our lovely City Lord Xia ate another meal in the cafeteria before returning to the main topic. Sect leader Jun, under your leadership, Iron Bone has undergone earth-shaking changes in just a few months. It was definitely not flattery. In the past, Iron Bone was the most inferior sect in his eyes. Since the 100th sect recruitment, it had become unstoppable. It was really unexpected for Xie Guanquan. Previously, because of the destruction of the Spirit Spring sect, he did not hesitate to fall out with Alliance Master Qin because he felt that Jun Changshao was a daring little guy with character. Jun Changshao said modestly, it's just the beginning, there's still a long way to go. City Lord Xia said, in my opinion, Sect leader Jun's sect is like a sleeping dragon coiled around Iron Bone Mountain. The day it wakes up is the time to soar. This sentence touched Jun Changshao. Because, the country in his previous life was described as an eastern dragon, slowly awakening after decades of development. One day, the dragon's roar will resound throughout the sky and earth. My country, my home. I don't know if I can go back in this life. If there is a possibility of changing the name, he may consider changing the sect to Huaxia, to remind himself that although he has transmigrated to another world, he is still a Huaxia soul. City Lord Xia said again, it is a great fortune for my Qingyang city to have such a sect with unlimited potential. Jun Changshao said, thank you, City Lord, for your praise. Xie Guanquan chatted for a while and then set off to leave. When he walked to the foot of the mountain, he looked up at the mountain that was already lingering with spiritual energy, and said with a dignified look, Sect leader Jun, please develop well. The 3.6 million people of Qingyang City will be deeply proud of the existence of Iron Bone. 3.6 million people, I'm being represented again, but I'm happy. In City Lord Xia's heart, Iron Bone was the hope of Qingyang City. As the saying goes, when a man achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs will ascend to heaven. Sooner or later, the sect will be full of glory because of its strength. Because Jun Changshao wanted to keep a low profile, City Lord Xia returned to Qingyang City and buried the news of Iron Bone being rated as one of the top 3 in his heart. It was obviously a big matter for the city, but he couldn't say it out loud. This was undoubtedly very painful. The head of the certification headquarters was even more painful. A top 3 sect with unlimited potential appeared in a 9th grade county. This kind of news must be announced to the public to make the county famous. However, since Iron Bone chose to keep a low profile, he could only record it and not announce it to the public. Head Elder Zhou said, in this old man's opinion, sect leader Jun is worried that his reputation will attract unnecessary trouble, so he chose to keep a low profile. Yi Tianjian shook his head and said, the top 3 sects have special protection from the certification headquarters. He chose not to announce it to the public, which is equivalent to giving up this right. Ah! There is such a thing. If sect leader Jun knew, he would definitely break down. I'm fucking keeping a low profile because I'm worried that people are afraid of being famous, pigs are afraid of being fat. In the end, the top 3 sects have the protection of the certification headquarters. If I knew this would happen, I would have acted high profile. Chapter 274. Jun Changshao didn't care much about the evaluation of the top 3. So, he continued to train as usual. He continued to train and instruct his disciples as usual. In his opinion, the most important thing was to develop Iron Bone into the strongest sect on the falling star continent and remove the time bomb that was bound to its soul. Sigh. Li Luocho said, Sect Master chose to keep a low profile and missed the opportunity to make the sect famous. It's a pity. Jun Changshao sipped his tea and said, as long as Iron Bone is strong, there will be many more opportunities to make a name for ourselves. We don't lack this opportunity. Li Luocho said, "What I mean is, if the outside world knows that our sect is rated as top 3, it will definitely attract many outstanding youths to sign up." Same. Jun Changshao said, "It will also attract endless challenges from many sections." Li Luocho thought for a while and said, "That's true." On the Falling Star continent, many people would take the initiative to challenge martial artists of higher realms, either to prove their strength or to fight for a position. There were also forces that were bored enough to challenge high-ranked and highly evaluated sections. Iron Bone was rated as top 3. Once the news spread, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. A top 3 sect in a 9th grade county. Many forces would definitely have doubts and come to challenge them. Iron Bone had just started and needed to develop slowly. It would definitely be very helpless to deal with challenges from various forces every day. Iron Bone disciples were deeply proud of their sect being rated as top 3, but they also worked even harder to cultivate because they couldn't be a burden. Just like that, the sect's martial cultivation style became stronger. With a sufficient supply of medicinal pills, Jun Changshao did not lack resources for the time being, so he focused on his own cultivation. 7th grade sect. This was only the second step. There were still 6th grade sects and even higher sects waiting to be surpassed. As the sect master, Jun Changshao had to improve his realm regardless of whether he was recognized by the certification center or not. At the beginning of the month, the AI family continued to hold the auction. After it was over, Master AI personally delivered the money, seeds, and medicinal herbs. After refining quite a few more pills, Jun Changshao murmured, "I can't keep giving them out. I have to set up a pill pavilion and let the disciples collect them themselves." The other sects all had their own alchemy distribution organizations and arranged for their elders. If a disciple wanted to receive an elixir, it was either based on their contribution or their cultivation base. Because there were no elders in Iron Bone, Jun Changshao opened the elixir pavilion, and the members of the medicine hall were temporarily responsible for distributing the elixirs. Of course, they wouldn't give it to just anyone. After all, they didn't have enough resources to sustain it for a long time. Jun Changshao also set the rules that disciples could receive a certain number of energy-gathering pills per month based on their rank. As for the body sculpting pills, meridian unlocking pills, and chi revolving pills, they were free to take them. In this way, the new disciples did not need Jun Changshao to distribute the pills, and they could go to the pill pavilion to collect them. The medicinal pill pavilion was just the beginning. Jun Changshao calculated that when there were enough ores to refine more weapons, he would set up a weapon pavilion and let the disciples who contributed to the sect receive them themselves. Lu Qianqian leaned against the door of the main hall and said indifferently, "Under the sect master's management, the sect is becoming more and more comprehensive." "That's a must," Jun Changshao said. After a few months of development, if there were no changes, wouldn't his efforts be in vain? However, Lu Qianqian said coldly, "Compared to the real big sects, there's still a big gap." Jun Changshao said, "No one can become a fatty in one go, so don't rush, take it slow." Lu Qianqian did not say anything, turned around and left. This woman was still as cold as ever. The disciples received the corresponding elixirs. They were either cultivating in the spiritual power array or tempering their bodies in the training room or the training tower. Jun Changshao, who had arranged everything, continued to cultivate and break through to the 8th grade martial master realm. Unfortunately, as the realm increased, the difficulty of cultivation also increased. Even with the high multiplier chi gathering pills, it would take at least more than a month. The development of the sect had to be done slowly. Cultivation would definitely have to be done step by step. Just like that, a month passed peacefully. During this period, a daily strength test was held, and the disciples who improved faster also received corresponding rewards. The 4th batch of medicinal herbs in the medicinal garden had also matured under the careful cultivation of Elder Wei and the members. They had also provided Sect Master Jun with many high multiplier chi gathering pills. What he cared about the most was the 200,000 medicinal herbs planted around the sect. Once they matured again, not only could they replenish a large number of pills, but they could also make the Iron Bone Mountain's spiritual energy even better. Half a month later, the second batch of medicinal herbs had matured. Because they had been planted before, the growth cycle of the 200,000 medicinal herbs was faster, and the strength of their spiritual energy was higher than before. Jun Changshao happily refined more than 30,000 qi-gathering pills to replenish the pills in the pill pavilion, allowing the disciples to have sufficient martial arts resources. What was even more satisfying was that, as the second batch of medicinal herbs matured, the spiritual energy they released filled the mountaintop, and it was even more spiritual. Elder Wei led the members of the medicinal hall and continued to plant the third batch of seeds. As long as the money was in place, the Iron Bone Mountain would naturally be slowly transformed into a treasure land filled with spiritual energy. Hoo-hoo! In the room, after a night of cultivation, the spiritual energy in Jun Changxiao's Dantian cyclone had reached its peak and was constantly transforming. His entire body was releasing a thick heaven and earth attribute. An hour later, the spiritual energy began to converge and return to the body. Hoo! Jun Changxiao exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and gradually opened his eyes. 2 rays of light flashed past. This meant that his realm had already entered the 8th stage from the 7th stage. Because of the magical tendon changing Jing and pills, it took less than 2 months. It could be said that it was quite fast. Bang! He punched the testing machine and displayed a strength of 110,000 Jin. TSK Tisk. The system sighed, the host's current strength is already ahead of even the most outstanding genius. It is completely comparable to an ordinary second-stage Wuzong. Jun Changshao said with dissatisfaction, according to the current improvement, even if I reach the peak of Martial Master, I won't be able to use my own strength to control the Green Dragon Crescent Blade. The system said, after breaking through Wuzong, your strength will increase greatly. At that time, the host will not need to borrow the help increase talisman and will be able to use it steadily. Yes. After breaking through, Jun Changshao continued to cultivate. In the end, he sadly realized that it would take at least 4 to 5 months to become a 9th-grade martial master. There were only 4 months left before he went to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect. There was no hope for him to break through to the peak of martial master. Unless, Jun Changshao waved his hand and said, use spirit stones. Although the high multiplier Qi gathering pill could increase the speed of the spiritual energy gathered in the spirit stones was purer, so it would definitely be faster to absorb it. Usually, sect leader Jun was reluctant to use it. After all, 1 pill was 10,000 taels, which was simply burning money. Before challenging the Sacred Spring Sect, he could only rely on spirit stones to break through to the peak of martial master. Chapter 275. In the month that Jun Changshao had been cultivating seriously, Yi Xingqian had successfully advanced from a peak martial disciple to a martial master. His spirit root and resources were on par with Li Qingyang and the others. He was able to catch up because of his previous life's martial Dao experience and because he had cultivated the Taishan Sutra. Speaking of which, Li Qingyang and the others did not have rich martial Dao experience, nor did they have a cultivation method above the divine grade. They were able to catch up with Night Emperor and not be left far behind. This showed how powerful the martial Dao resources that Jun Changshao had provided for his disciples were. This was the Iron Bone clan. With the system's resources, as long as one's aptitude was not too bad and was willing to work hard, they could also quickly become stronger. As a reincarnated martial emperor, Yi Xingqian was a proper main character template. Being in the sect, his monstrous aura seemed to have weakened a lot. No. He was still very strong. This kind of strength would become more and more obvious with the various resources and the Taishan Sutra. As for Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others, they would not be discouraged by being one step behind their junior brother. They continued to cultivate diligently. A few more days passed. They had successively transformed their spirit energy and successfully advanced from a martial disciple to a martial master, opening a new chapter of martial Dao. Sect Master. One day, Li Qingyang said, Junior brother Li has also broken through to a martial master. Among the inner disciples, only junior brother Tian is still a peak martial disciple. This was because his aptitude was high grade. Because of the fucking purchase restriction, Jun Changshao could only rely on the hidden rewards from completing missions if he wanted to obtain the supreme grade aptitude transformation liquid. No rush, no rush. Tian Qi would transform into a supreme grade spirit root sooner or later. As for the cold eldest senior sister, she would definitely have entered the martial master realm long ago. In this way, there were already 7 martial master disciples in the Iron Bone clan. This kind of strength was comparable to a 6th-rate sect. This was not enough. They had to become stronger. There were only 4 months left to challenge the Sacred Spring sect. Jun Changshao distributed 50 spirit stones to each inner disciple, hoping to increase their rank as soon as possible. With sufficient spirit stones to absorb, how could the disciples of the other sects compete? Sect Master Jun, don't go too far. As the date of Iron Bone's challenge to the Sacred Spring sect approached, the cultivators of the Azure Sun County would often discuss it. Although Iron Bone had done a lot of things during this period of time, most people were still not optimistic. After all, they were challenging a 5th-rate sect. This kind of large sect that had both resources and heritage was definitely not something that a new sect could contend with. While most people were not optimistic about it, City Lord Xia thought that it was possible. After all, after witnessing the sect certification, he understood that many disciples of Iron Bone had the ability to fight above their level. Sect Master Jun, City Lord Xia said, "Go challenge the Sacred Spring sect. This Xia will represent Green Sun City's 3,600,000 citizens to go to the Sacred Spring Mountain to cheer for you." Jun Changshao rolled his eyes at him and said, "So, this is the reason why you came to my Iron Bone today?" The two of them were currently sitting in the Iron Bone cafeteria. There were 8 dishes on the table and a jar of fine wine. City Lord Xia smiled and said, "Sect Master Jun is serving the dishes, this Xia is serving the wine. How can this be a freeloader?" As he spoke, he raised his chopsticks and ate with a blissful expression. Lu Wancher's culinary skills were too good. After eating it once, he felt like he was chewing wax when he returned to the Azure Sun City. Jun Changshao could still afford a meal, so he drank with City Lord Xia to his heart's content. During this time, they talked about the interesting stories of the pugilistic world. After 3 rounds of wine, Xie Guangquan sighed and a worried expression appeared on his face. "City Lord Xia, why are you sighing?" Jun Changshao asked. Xie Guangquan drank a mouthful of wine and said, "This Xie received news that a few strong counties in southwest Yangzhou are actively recruiting soldiers and buying horses. I'm afraid that there will be a war soon." Jun Changshao said, "War without a country? Every county in southwest Yangzhou is equivalent to a country. They often wage war for resources. This is a game played by the strong counties. Why is City Lord Xia worried? This Xia is afraid that some strong counties will expand their territory and devour our small Azure Sun County." Jun Changshao was silent. The 9th-tier Azure Sun County was the weakest county in southwest Yangzhou. If a strong county wanted to expand their territory, they would definitely be the first target. Xie Guangquan said, "Thousands of years ago, there were more than 500 counties in southwest Yangzhou. Today, there are only 200 left. Then the 300 counties were destroyed?" Jun Changshao asked. "That's right." Xie Guangquan drank a mouthful of wine as the worry on his face deepened. Our Azure Sun County was able to survive the war because of its remote location. However, we will be destroyed sooner or later if we continue to live under the influence of so many experts. Moreover, he paused for a moment and said, "The 6th-tier True Sun County's county governor is very ambitious and is not far from our county. Once he starts a war, not to mention Azure Sun County, even the 8th-tier True Sun County will be destroyed." Jun Changshao drank a cup of wine and said, "I thought that the world was peaceful. I didn't expect our Azure Sun County to be in such a dangerous situation." "Thank you, Mayor." He put down his cup and said seriously, I, Iron Bone, am a citizen of Azure Sun City. If a war breaks out, I will fight for my home. Swoosh! Xie Guangquan stood up and raised his cup. I salute Sect Master Jun on behalf of the 3.6 million citizens of Azure Sun City. Jun Changshao stood up with his cup of wine and said, it's a little too grand. After drinking the wine, he sat down. Oh right. He asked curiously, Mayor Xia, who is the county governor of Azure Sun County? The mayor was only in charge of the city's affairs. The county governor controlled the entire county and was the mayor's direct superior. Not to mention Jun Changshao, who transmigrated. Even the locals of Azure Sun County didn't know much about the county governor. They had even forgotten that there was such a boss. Sigh. Xie Guangquan said helplessly, the county governor of Azure Sun County is very secretive. I have only seen him twice in the past few decades since I took over as the mayor. So secretive? Jun Changshao was stunned. Xie Guangquan shook his head and said, he is so secretive that he hasn't asked about the county's affairs in the past few decades. However, he paused and said seriously, the county governor is very strong. He defeated the county governor of a grade 8 county in the county competition a few decades ago. Is that so? Jun Changshao asked curiously, what is the name of our county governor? How old is he? What is his realm? Xie Guangquan said, the county governor is called Yunhe. He is about 30 to 40 years old. Based on the fact that he defeated the county governor of a grade 8 county, he is at least a grade 8 Wuzong. Yunhe. This name was enough to be a wild crane. As for the grade 8 Wuzong, it surprised Jun Changshao. An expert of this level could be an elder of a fifth-rate sect. Do you have a specific appearance? Such a mysterious county governor piqued Jun Changshao's interest. He wanted to know more about him. County Governor Yun likes to wear a blue robe and never leaves his wine gourd. He doesn't look old, but he has a head of white hair, Xie Guangquan said. He has quite a personality. Jun Changshao noted it down and said, if there is a chance, I hope to meet this wild county governor. It's a little difficult. Xie Guangquan said, County Governor Yun comes and goes like a shadow. No one knows if he is in the county now or if he has gone to other counties for sightseeing. As the county governor of a county, he doesn't care about anything and doesn't ask about anything. How enviable. Jun Changshao also wanted to be a hands-off boss and leave the matters to Li Qingyang and the others. He wanted to travel around the Falling Star continent. However, with the main mission, he could only do his best to develop. Wild crane. Travel the world. This kind of happy life could only be experienced when the sect became the strongest sect. Come, let's drink. P.S. New week, come, recommendation tickets, monthly tickets. Chapter 276. After drinking with City Lord Xia, Jun Changshao understood that although the world seemed peaceful, there were undercurrents. If a war were to break out in southwest Yangzhou, there was a possibility that Azure Sun County would be destroyed. When the nest was overturned, how could there be an unbroken egg? Iron Bone was in Azure Sun City. Once the flames of war spread, it would definitely be affected. Thus, helping City Lord Xia was also helping himself. We still need time. Jun Changshao said. The sect was still in its infancy. If a war broke out in other counties and attacked Azure Sun County, it would definitely be difficult to organize forces to resist. As long as they had enough time, they would have the strength to protect themselves. How long would it take? Naturally, the longer, the better. Of course. Jun Changshao also didn't want to be some savior. If a war really came, he would only protect Azure Sun City where the sect was located. As for the other cities, and, for the sake of the AI clan, if he had the ability, he would naturally do his best to help. If he really couldn't, he could only focus on defense. Sect leader Jun didn't have the ambition to conquer the world. That was something for the emperor to do. As a sect leader, how could he overstep his authority? Hall Master Li in the main hall, Jun Changshao said, order the members of Drizzle Hall to buy a large amount of ores in each city. War didn't only rely on people, but also on equipment. Regardless of whether they could use it to refine, it was definitely not wrong to buy it first. Li Luoqiu said, war is about economics. It won't start immediately. Sect leader is thinking too much. Be prepared for danger in times of peace. Jun Changshao said. All right. Li Luoqiu rubbed her jade hands and said, you have to pay. Jun Changshao threw a few interspatial rings over. Li Luoqiu counted them and found that there was a total of 50 million taels. Thus, she was a little confused and asked, how much does Sect leader plan to buy? Jun Changshao handed over cold-edged sword and other materials that could be refined. He said, buy according to the ores here first. If there aren't any, then buy other ores. N. Li Luoqiu summoned Viper and the others and distributed the banknotes. She ordered them to go to the 8 cities in Qingyang City as fast as possible to purchase the items. The members of the Drizzle Hall who had learned the cloud treading steps were very efficient in their work. In just 2 or 3 days, they were able to purchase the items one after another. The cold-edged sword, overlord spear, and unyielding iron shield had all been replenished. He had also purchased a lot of other ores of different quality. As for the 50 million taels, it was naturally all spent. Since Jun Changshao wanted to prepare for a rainy day, he naturally wouldn't be stingy with money. While cultivating, he opened the forging pavilion and began to forge weapons and equipment. After a round of inventory, he had refined over 200 cold-edged swords and over 300 overlord spears. Because he had obtained a large amount of iron ore from the Shao family, he had refined over 700 unyielding iron shields. Even so, it was impossible to equip 1,000 disciples with weapons and shields. The ambitious governor knew when the war would start. Therefore, after forging a lot of equipment and hoarding ores, Jun Changshao continued to cultivate. During this period, he had been taking qi-gathering pills and absorbing spirit stones. The speed of his spiritual energy accumulation could be said to be quite fast. In just 1.5 months, he had broken through from 8th grade to 9th grade martial master. There was a high improvement, but there was also a high cost. In 40 days, Sect leader Jun had absorbed 450 spirit cores. On average, he used 10 spirit cores a day. Not counting qi-gathering pills, just spirit stones. This guy had to spend 100,000 taels a day. He was really burning money. With his cultivation, even the patriarch of a 4th or 5th grade sect might not be able to afford it. The inner court disciples also cultivated with qi-gathering pills and spirit stones. Their cultivation had increased significantly. Yi Xingqian had become a 4th grade martial master. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others had become 3rd grade martial masters. Tian Qi, who had a high-grade spiritual root, broke through to martial master one step later. Although he had spirit stones, he had just become a 2nd grade martial master. At this time, there were less than 3 months left before the challenge to the Sacred Spring Sect. If there were enough spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to reach 5th grade martial master on average. But there was no more. On the other hand, qi-gathering pills had been harvested and planted by Elder Wei and the others. It had formed a virtuous cycle and they were self-sufficient. Although the high multiplier qi-gathering pills were good, as one's cultivation increased, taking them all the time would take up a lot of time. It was already very good. If the martial artists of the outside world knew that the Iron Bone Inner Court disciples were replenished with 10 to 15 times the normal amount of qi-gathering pills, they would definitely vomit blood in envy. Jun Changshao made up his mind and personally went down the mountain to Qingyang City. He spent 20 million to buy 2,000 spirit stones for himself and his disciples to cultivate and prepare for the challenge to the Sacred Spring Sect. The 100 million sent by clan head AI was spent on seeds, ores, and so many spirit stones. There wasn't much left. There was already a huge gap between them and the sects with deep foundations. If he didn't rely on the system and large amounts of money, how could he overtake them? During this period of cultivation, the sect held a small sect competition once every 3 months and a monthly strength test. Even if he used the great art of spring and autumn to speed up the process of time, this kind of thing still had to be done. It didn't mean that it didn't happen just because it wasn't written. Similarly, clan head AI would send resources to the sect and the medicine hall would harvest and replant the herbs. 2 months later. There were only 10 days left before the challenge to the Sacred Spring Sect. The discussions in the outside world became more and more intense. Many martial artists were constantly paying attention to the latest news. For example, had Iron Bone set off yet? The people of the 100 Sect Alliance had even placed spies at the foot of the mountain. As long as Jun Changshao set off with his disciples, they would immediately head to the Sacred Spring Sect. Cheer for Iron Bone? Impossible. They had to go and watch the joke. They had to ridicule them like brainless villains to forcefully show off their existence. The reason why they didn't set off in advance and even sent spies was because they were afraid that Iron Bone would back out and abandon the challenge. The 100 Sect Alliance's intention was very simple. Since they had issued a challenge to the Sacred Spring Sect, they had to fight like men. They couldn't back down. In Azure Sun City, City Lord Xia had already started to arrange matters to free up enough time to cheer for Iron Bone. In this aspect, Clan AI performed better. They didn't even hesitate to postpone the challenge because it was close to the auction. When all the other forces didn't have high hopes for Iron Bone, City Lord Xia and Clan AI were still able to stand firm. This was a true sign of a friend in need. The day of the challenge approached. The originally peaceful Azure Sun County became lively. The other forces in the other counties also started to move. An 8th-rate sect challenging a 5th-rate sect was unprecedented. Naturally, they had to go to the Sacred Spring Sect to watch the show. Miaohua Palace was filled with spiritual energy. Shi Jingxian sat in a picturesque pavilion and said, "Sect head Jun is going to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect soon. 10 more days." Lear muttered in her heart. It had been more than half a year since the auction. Why was Palace Master still thinking about Iron Bone? Prepare. Shi Jingxian said, "Go to the Sacred Spring Sect." Yes. Junior Sister Morong. On a county's official road, a woman in a tight outfit said, "I heard that an unrated sect is going to challenge a 5th-rate sect. Do you want to go and watch the show?" She was pretty, but compared to the junior sister walking in front of her, she was obviously inferior. The woman walking in front of her was about 16 or 17 years old. She was dressed in blue, had snow-white skin, a slender figure, an oval-shaped face, and willowy eyebrows. She exuded a noble aura. This was Xiao Ziji's ex-fiancée, Morong Xian. The cultivators on the road seemed to know that the two were disciples of the Lily Holy Sect. They all avoided them with fear in their eyes. An unrated sect? Morong Xian said. The senior sister said, "I think it's called Iron something sect." "Oh, right, it's the trash who had a marriage agreement with you." Iron Bone Upright Sect? Morong Xian was silent for a moment and said, "The training is over. There's still plenty of time. Why don't we go and take a look?" Junior sister. The senior sister said with a smile, "You've already broken through to 9th grade martial master. You're the fastest among the new disciples. You'll definitely get a good result in the upcoming sect competition. It's all because of Elder's good teaching." Morong Xian said humbly. The senior sister said, "How can that trash from the Azure Sun County be worthy of a genius like you?" It was a wise decision to break the engagement. Morong Xian frowned and said, "Senior sister, can we not talk about him? P.S. Please recommend me, monthly vote, and thank you for your tips." Chapter 277. There were only 10 days left before the challenge to the Holy Spring Sect. It wasn't short, but it wasn't long either. In these few days, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others stopped cultivating and began to adjust their states to better prepare for the upcoming battle. Then, what were their current realms? Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, Su Xiaoma, and Li Fei had already broken through to the 5th grade. Tian Qi was a 4th grade martial master and was only one step away from the 5th grade. Yi Xingqian, who cultivated the Taishan Sutra, was still ahead of them and had already broken through to the 6th grade. It wasn't just the inner disciples. Some outer disciples with good aptitudes had also broken through to the peak of the martial disciple realm in these few months. Long Xiang and Yang Yuhua were the first to enter the martial master realm. Because they weren't inner disciples, they only had access to qi gathering pills, so they had just entered the 1st grade. Other than Yao Menjing, who didn't cultivate, all the new disciples had broken through to the martial disciple realm and were all above the 2nd grade. Because of the body-shaping pills and the shaping room, they were far stronger than martial artists of the same level. If the 2 elders of the certification hall were to come again, they would definitely be deeply shocked. Of course, Iron Bone disciples didn't cultivate foolishly. They would also put their minds on comprehending cultivation techniques, so that martial arts and martial arts could progress together. Li Luoqiu had also entered the 7th grade from the 6th grade. This woman had always been focused on hidden weapons and movement techniques, so her realm didn't increase too quickly. Viper and Lynx had entered the 4th grade. They were previously gold medal assassins and relied on the sect's resources to enter the martial master realm from the martial disciple realm. After Li Qingyang's inventory, there were already more than 20 disciples who had reached the martial master realm. They had already met the 10 martial masters requirement to be promoted to a 6th-rate sect. Now, Iron Bone only lacked the sect leader to enter Wuzong. With another 510 disciples at the 12th stage of the channel opening realm, they could be promoted to the 6th rate. The sect still had 1,000 spots for disciples. They just needed to recruit them. If Jun Changshao couldn't break through to Wuzong, even if all the disciples met the requirements, it wouldn't be enough. Someone would ask. Couldn't the sect leader's strength be comparable to Wuzong? No. The certification center first looked at one's realm, then one's strength. He couldn't do without either of them. From the looks of it, it would take some time for Iron Bone to reach the 6th grade. According to the previous pace, as long as Jun Changshao reached the end of a certain realm, he would receive an epic quest. If he couldn't complete the mission, his realm would always be stuck. Boom! Inside the training room, Su Xiaoma kicked the testing machine. The strength displayed was 80,000 jin. Su Xiaoma grinned. To be able to display such strength at the level of a 5th-grade martial master, only a top genius would be able to do so. Under normal circumstances, the first requirement for a top genius was to have a saint-grade or divine-grade spiritual root. Although Su Xiaoma only had a supreme-grade spirit root, with the tempering of the body-shaping elixir and the training tower, he had made up for the difference in his spirit root. He was already on par with the top geniuses. An ordinary person with ordinary talent who was destined to be mediocre would become a top genius a year later. This was Jun Changshao's teaching. It was still not enough. His target was, let the disciple become a proud son of heaven, an existence revered by all. The admiration of all living beings. That's right, he had stepped into the martial emperor realm. Boom! Xiao Ziji punched the testing machine. The strength displayed was 83,000 jin. Su Xiaoma, who was originally a little proud, grabbed his hair and broke down. At the same level, junior brother Xiao is actually 3,000 jin stronger than me. Xiao Ziji smiled. Senior brother Su, in terms of speed, I am far behind you. Su Xiaoma immediately felt balanced. Li Qingyang walked over and said, Junior brother Zhao's physical strength is also not comparable to ours. Su Xiaoma, who had just found her balance, immediately leaned against the wall with tears in her eyes when she heard what second senior brother said. Boom! Li Qingyang punched the testing machine. The strength displayed was 85,000 jin. His strength was 2,000 jin higher than Xiao Ziji's because the former had not opened his meridians and was leading when he focused on cultivating his physical body. Boom! Boom! Tian Qi and Li Fei tested one after another. The strength displayed was 60,000 jin and 78,000 jin respectively. With the same amount of resources and hard work, the difference in strength between people of the same level would not be too big. Tian Qi's strength was only 60,000 jin. Firstly, he was only a grade 4 martial master. Secondly, he had a high-grade spirit root. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei focused on body techniques. Although their strength was slightly weaker, they had their own specialties. Xiao Ziji focused on body tempering. When facing a grade 5 fire dragon, even if he could not completely withstand it, it should not be a problem for him to fight a few rounds. Junior brother Yi, come and try too, Li Qingyang said. Humph, Yi Xingchen walked over. He gathered spiritual energy in his fist and punched the testing machine. It was obvious that his strength was 90,000 jin. Oh my god, junior brother Yi is so powerful. He entered the sect later than us, but his strength is actually 5,000 jin higher than second senior brothers. Junior brother, how did you do it? Su Xiaoma and Li Fei exclaimed. Yi Xingchen did not speak. He said helplessly in his heart, I have the Taishen Sutra and am a grade 6 martial master. Yet, I am only 5,000 jin higher than Li Qingyang. Of course. Jun Changshao had given them so many resources. If Night Emperor could leave them far behind, wouldn't it prove that everything provided by the system could not compare to the reincarnation of a martial emperor? Actually, Yi Xingchen was wrong. He should not be thinking about how much stronger he was compared to Li Qingyang and the others. Instead, he should be thinking about how big the gap was between him and the grade 6 martial master of his previous life. Very big. Although he had a divine grade spirit root in his previous life, he had to work hard for all the resources. He took 3 years to become a grade 6 martial master and his strength was only about 70,000. In this life, he took a year to reach grade 6 and his strength was 20,000 jin higher. What was the reason? Although the Taishen Sutra played a part, it only accounted for 20%. The 80% was due to the various martial arts resources provided by Jun Changshao. Huff huff. In the study, strong spiritual energy whizzed out of Jun Changshao's body. It lasted for about an hour before it began to converge. Shwa! He opened his eyes and 2 rays of light flashed. At this point, he had stepped into the peak of Martial Master from Grade 9 Martial Master. In 2 months, he had stepped into the peak of Martial Master from Grade 9 Martial Master. This meant that as long as he had enough resources, it was not difficult to break through quickly. Ding! Host has stepped into the peak of Martial Master. Requirement met. Epic mission activated. Sure enough, it came again. Jun Changshao opened the data panel. Under the Sect mission appeared an epic mission. The content was lead disciples to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect, incomplete. This mission was actually related to the Sacred Spring Sect. He clicked on the details. Epic Mission 3. Mission details, host, please lead disciples to the Sacred Spring Mountain within a month and challenge the 5th-rate Sacred Spring Sect. Mission requirements. Disciple must defeat 0/3 of the Sacred Spring Sect's direct disciples, 0/10 of the Sacred Spring Sect's inner disciples, and 0/30 of the Sacred Spring Sect's outer disciples. Mission failure, did not go to the Sacred Spring Sect within the time limit. Could not defeat the Sacred Spring Sect's disciples during the mission period. Mission reward? It seems quite simple, Jun Changshao said. The big boss of the second epic mission was a grade 5 fire dragon. No matter how powerful the Sacred Spring Sect's direct disciples were, could they be stronger than a grade 5 Wuzong beast? The system said, the host defeated the fire dragon with the help of hard-to-stop saber. Disciple was almost wiped out by it. Jun Changshao was silent. P.S. 5 chapters. Requesting recommendation votes, requesting monthly votes. Chapter 278. The third epic mission was related to the Sacred Spring Sect, which was a good idea. After all, Jun Changshao was going to take his disciples there to challenge it. If he could complete it, not only would he be able to display his prowess to the sect, he would also be able to obtain contribution points and break through to Wuzong. It could be said to be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. However, there would be a big change in the plan for the challenge. At first, Jun Changshao thought that it would be enough to bring the inner disciples and Zhou Hong, but judging from the number of missions, he could only bring the outer disciples. According to the normal rules of the challenge, each person would fight 1 match. That would require 43 disciples. Furthermore, Jun Changshao did not expect to win all the battles this time. Therefore, after some consideration, he decided to bring 50 disciples with him. Needless to say, the 25 people who had participated in the Death Valley trial would definitely follow. Li Tiantian, Sima Zhongda, and the others were naturally present. After all, they had entered the sect earlier, and their cultivation levels were higher than those who came later. Disciples like Lin Jianghang and Cui Bujian were also sent out. Although Song Xianzhou had entered the sect late, his aptitude and cultivation level were high, so he would definitely follow along. Sect leader Jun went through a round of selection, and all the Iron Bone disciples were sent out. Of course, he didn't send Viper and Mountain Cat. After all, they were too old and didn't look like disciples. Sect leader. At the entrance of the canteen, Ma Yongning hugged his saber and asked, "Can I go?" When this guy joined the sect, although he often helped Lu Wancher take care of the canteen, it did not affect his cultivation in the slightest. Furthermore, he was a dedicated saber cultivator. Due to the fact that sword and saber cultivation required one's aptitude and were extremely extreme, they were relatively rare on the Starfall continent. "You're too old," Jun Changshao said. These words were like a sharp sword stabbing into Ma Yongning's heart. It was so painful that he found it difficult to breathe. "Sect leader," he said in a low voice, "I just look a little old. My actual age is only 29 years old." Fuck. If he didn't mention it, one would suspect that he was in his 40s or 50s. The corner of Jun Changshao's mouth twitched as he said, "She looks even more anxious than Yang Yuhua." Ma Yongning said with a dignified look, "Please let me fight and prove to the head with my strength, prove to do." He wanted to fight because of Lu Wancher. That little girl would often sit in the cafeteria with her chin propped up on her hand, looking at the disciples cultivating outside and muttering to herself, "I really hope that when I go to challenge the Sacred Spring sect, the sect master would bring me along to watch the show." Ma Yongning asked. Lu Wancher said seriously, "Let's go cheer for our senior brothers." The seemingly careless words touched Ma Yongning. He secretly decided that he had to challenge the Sacred Spring sect and use his strength to defeat his opponent and make Lu Wancher happy. Just yesterday, the little girl had finally obtained the right to follow the sect master to the Sacred Springs sect after pestering him endlessly, so he naturally had to participate in the battle. Clang! Ma Yongning unsheathed his saber and said, "Sect leader, please respect a bladesman. Otherwise, I will immediately commit suicide in front of you." Jun Changshao's mouth twitched. Lu Wancher took care of him with just a few bowls of rice. "How dare you talk about respect?" However, since he had to go, he said, "I can go, but it depends on the situation. I'll decide whether or not I'll fight." "All right." Ma Yongning sheathed his blade. 1 and 2 also walked over and said, "Sect leader, we are much younger than him. Can we fight for the sect?" Hearing this, Ma Yongning almost pulled out his saber and challenged the 2 bastards to a battle of dignity. 1 and 2 were indeed very young. They were only in their early 20s, and they had already entered the realm of peak martial disciple. Jun Changshao decided to bring the 2 of them along. The number of participants increased from 50 to 53. Then, Jun Changshao chose another 147 outer disciples, making a total of 200. In an away battle, they had to have momentum, so the purpose of the outer disciples following was to cheer for the disciples who were going to fight. After everything was settled, there were still 5 days before the day of the challenge. Jun Changshao gathered the disciples early in the morning. The disciples all knew that the sect leader was going to bring their senior brothers to challenge the 5th-rate Sacred Spring sect, so they gathered at the martial arts practice field, lined up neatly, and all of them held their heads high. Jun Changshao stood in front of the main hall and said, "This battle may be difficult, but we have to let the world know that even if there is a mountain in front of us, we, the Iron Bone clan, can overcome it. Be an Iron Bone clan, do Iron Bone clan's things." All the disciples had their hands behind their backs as they shouted loudly. Their voices resounded in the sky above the sect, revealing the aura of iron bones. Shwa! Jun Changshao waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Yes. Under his lead, the 53 disciples who had participated in the battle and 147 disciples walked out of the sect in a grandiose manner and walked down the mountain path. Li Luoqiu watched them leave and said, "Sect leader, the celebratory wine has been prepared. I and the disciples will wait for your triumphant return." Yes. Jun Changshao said. After the disciples sent them off, they returned to the sect and began to cultivate even more crazily. They wanted to become stronger and fight for the sect's supreme glory in the future. On this day, the 200 disciples of the Iron Bone clan left the Iron Bone Mountain under the lead of the second sect leader and walked towards the unreachable mountain in the distance. In this battle, they would either succeed or die. The Iron Bone clan has set off. Go and report to the alliance leader. The spies squatting at the foot of the mountain hurriedly sent the news to the Grand Chi sect. Jun Changshao had already noticed these people, but because they were just spying, he did not pay attention to them. Not long after, the news reached Qin Haoran's ears. He smiled coldly and said, "Jun Changshao really dares to challenge the Sacred Spring sect." The Long Blade sect leader grinned and said, "In the Sacred Spring Mountain, he boasted in front of so many people. If he doesn't go, how can he establish himself in the Jianghu?" Situ Wang, who was spat out blood, said indifferently, "A junior who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Go and experience the fear of a fifth-rate sect." "Let's go." Qin Haoran said, "Let's go too." Not long after Jun Changshao left, dozens of elders of the 100 Sect Alliance led their disciples and headed towards the Sacred Spring sect. The Iron Bone clan challenging the Sacred Spring sect was a magnificent feat that had never happened before. As a sect in the same county, they should have supported them. But this time, they were just going to watch a joke. Someone was going to support and cheer them on. Who? Xie Guanquan and the AI family. As a matter of fact, when Jun Changshao walked out of the Iron Bone Mountain range, he saw City Lord Xia and more than a dozen Green Sun City's patriarchs. Sect leader Jun Xie Guanquan clasped his hands and said, "Family heads and I represent the 3.6 million citizens of Qingyang City. We are willing to travel with the Iron Bone clan." "Thank you." Jun Changshao clasped his hands and said. To be able to support him at this time made him very grateful. He also deeply understood that at least there were still people who supported him. "Father!" Li Qingyang shouted at his father. Family head Li said, "My son, the Li family is proud of you." Sect leader Jun, when Jun Changshao was about to leave, Ai Shang brought Ai Shang Fong and Ai Shang Ku over from another road. Behind them were many family heads of Huyang City, including Song Xuanzhou's father, Old Man Song. Who said that the protagonist must bear the fate of being the enemy of the whole world? Who said that the whole world is plotting against the protagonist? No. In this cruel world, there was also friendship. Even if this friendship was built on business, to challenge the Sacred Spring sect and dare to accompany him, this was an iron relationship. Everyone. Jun Changshao said, "Today, you have cheered for my Iron Bone. Jun will remember this kindness in his heart. In the future, if you need my Iron Bone, I will do my best to help." His words were very serious. But the people who came with him only smiled. They would never have thought that sect leader Jun's words would be so hard to ask for in the future, so precious. Chapter 279. There were many places with abundant spirit qi in the falling star continent. Many sects would choose to build near mountains and rivers. A few thousand miles away from the Azure Sun County, there was such a mountain. The mountain was filled with spirit chi and the mountain spring contained boundless spirit chi. It was called the Sacred Spring, hence the name Sacred Spring Mountain. 800 years ago, an expert came here to establish a sect. He established the Sacred Springs sect and worked hard to develop it. Today, it had become a fifth-rate sect and had a pivotal position in the surrounding thousands of miles. Many martial artists believed that the Sacred Spring sect's achievements today had a lot to do with the Sacred Spring. Drinking the water all year round would definitely be of great help to one's martial Tao. Unfortunately, martial artists who were not from the sect could not drink it. On this day, in front of the Sacred Springs sect that was filled with spirit chi, various forces came in an endless stream. They climbed up the stone stairs that had hundreds of years of history. A fifth-rate sect is indeed majestic. A martial artist looked at the rich spirit chi gathered at the mountainside with envy. If not for Iron Bone challenging the Sacred Springs sect, I'm afraid I wouldn't have the chance to enter such a large sect. Speaking of which, the 8th-rate sect in the Azure Sun County is really bold. They actually dared to challenge the Sacred Springs sect with an egg. What wouldn't a new sect do to rise in status these days? It's okay to challenge a 6th-rate sect, but if they lose to a 5th-rate sect, they won't be able to survive in the pugilistic world. The martial artists who climbed up the Sacred Spring Mountain were discussing. They came from other counties. Although they were here to watch Iron Bone challenge the Sacred Springs sect, they actually wanted to visit a large sect. Why? Because they did not take Iron Bone seriously at all. Once the challenge started, they would definitely be tortured badly. If it was a 6th-rate sect, they might still be optimistic. However, no one in their right mind would think that an 8th-rate sect could win against a 5th-rate sect. The Sacred Springs sect was really big. Just the outer courtyard's martial arts field was comparable to the venue of the Great Sect Tournament in Liang City. The main hall was incomparably majestic and exuded an ancient aura. One look and one could tell that it was very old. This was the foundation of a sect that had been established for 800 years. Even some new 5th-rate sects might not be able to compare. After the various cultivators came in, they looked at the unique architecture and the solemn hall, and all of them were filled with awe and veneration. As expected of a large sect. Just by standing at the entrance of the outer courtyard, a feeling of worship rose in his heart. However, when they saw the disciples with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes bustling back and forth, and the auras they emitted were all at the martial disciple level, they were deeply shocked. Who hadn't seen a martial disciple before? However, the martial disciples of the Sacred Springs sect, just from their auras alone, were at the middle to high level. The martial Tao realms on the Starfall continent were further divided into ordinary, intermediate, advanced, and extreme levels. Let's talk about the martial disciple level. Every rank had a strength increase of about 1,000–2,000. Those with the lowest increase in strength would be called ordinary martial disciples. Those who reached 1,500 would be called intermediate, and those who reached 2,000 would be advanced. An extreme martial disciple could reach 2,500. The increase in strength depended on one's talent and various other factors. Therefore, extreme-grade martial disciples were often referred to as top geniuses. Then, what was the difference between an extreme-grade and an ordinary-grade martial disciple? Yes. And it was very big. Let's take a peak martial disciple as an example. The strength of an ordinary martial disciple was at most 12,000 Jin, and the strength of an extreme martial disciple was at least 25,000 Jin. With a difference of 2 times, an extreme-grade martial disciple could easily defeat an ordinary-grade martial disciple. The Sacred Springs sect disciples bustling about in the outer courtyard walked steadily and emitted a strong aura. At a glance, the elders of various forces could tell that they were definitely at the middle to high level. It was already good enough for their own sect to have a few middle to high level martial disciples. The 5th-rate sects could be seen everywhere. This was a huge gap. Everyone. At this moment, a graceful disciple walked over and said in a cultured and refined manner, "The room has been arranged. Please follow me." Everyone was shocked again. This disciple should be less than 20 years old, but he was a martial master. The aura he emitted was also very strong. He was definitely at the extreme level. He is one of the direct disciples of the Sacred Spring Sect, named Qing Linfeng. Is he the young master Linfeng who went to the Flood Dragon village alone and killed more than 300 bandits with only a 3-foot-long sword? Tisk Tsk, a hero from a young age. Everyone followed behind with awe in their eyes. The Sacred Spring Sect allowed a direct disciple with an extreme spiritual root to arrange a room for him. How honorable! Wait! At this moment, everyone's eyes stopped at the entrance to the inner courtyard. They saw a gentle and beautiful woman walking in surrounded by female disciples. That's the palace master of Miaohua Palace. My God, why is the patriarch of a fourth-rate sect here? Is she here to visit the Sacred Spring Sect? Everyone was surprised. Qing Linfeng said, Palace Master, she heard that Iron Bone is challenging the Sacred Spring Sect, so she's here to watch the show. Everyone's mouth twitched. An 8th-rate sect challenging a 5th-rate sect was already unbelievable. It was hard to accept that the 4th-rate Miaohua Palace was involved. At this moment, 2 young girls walked out of the inner courtyard. The lily pattern on their shoulders was very eye-catching. Everyone's eyes widened. The lily pattern, could it be? Qing Linfeng said, they are disciples of the Lily Holy Sect. They are also here to watch the show. Hiss! Everyone gasped. Iron Bone's challenge to the Sacred Spring Sect had alarmed people from a second-rate sect. What kind of world was this? That young girl is Murong Xian, the genius of the Murong family in Tianhai City, right? Tsk, I've heard of this girl. She has a supreme-grade spiritual root and is known as the pride of Tianhai County. The 11th elder of the Lily Holy Sect took a liking to her and personally went to the Murong family to take her as a disciple. It caused a huge commotion at that time. The most sensational thing is that she brought people from the Lily Holy Sect to the Shao family in Qingyang County to cancel the engagement. I heard that too. It seems that a supreme-grade spiritual root genius appeared in the 9th-rate county, but his cultivation regressed and he became a good-for-nothing. His fiancée, Murong Xian, divorced him. In the Falling Star continent, men divorce women. I didn't expect a woman to divorce a man. What a coward! Murong Xian's eyes flashed with anger when she heard everyone's discussion. Junior sister. The senior sister whispered, don't lower yourself to the level of these superficial men. Everyone saw Murong Xian's anger and quickly shut up. They obediently followed Qing Linfeng to the inner courtyard. The senior sister said, Junior sister, breaking off the engagement with that good-for-nothing is already in the past. But you can't stop others from talking, so don't mind it too much. Murong Xian didn't say anything and felt guilty. Only she knew that she wasn't angry because others were talking about her, but because they were laughing at Xiao Ziji. It was undeniable that the two of them had nothing to do with each other. But he became a laughingstock because she was too young and ignorant to break off the engagement. Xiao Ziji, I'm sorry. I just wanted to pursue freedom. I didn't want to hurt you. Murong Xian murmured in her heart. Was sorry useful? This was a matter of different people's opinions. But in Jun Changxiao's view, whether Murong Xian did it intentionally or not, her actions had caused a great injury to Xiao Ziji's dignity. 2 years later, he would definitely bring his disciples to the Lily Holy Sect to seek justice. In the previous world, young people didn't need to take legal responsibility. But in the Falling Star continent, since you did something wrong, you had to pay the price. Because here, the strong were respected. Really guilty? Sure, bring those people from the Lily Holy Sect who were full of superiority to the Shao family and come to my Iron Bone clan to apologize. That's your sincerity. Chapter 280. In just a few days, various forces entered the Sacred Spring Sect one after another, experiencing the magnificence of a 5th-rate sect and its hundreds of years of history. Of course. Iron Bone was also waiting for the challenge. Calculating the time, there was only 1 day left until the day of the challenge. Why hadn't that overconfident sect arrived yet? Would he be scared? Would he not come? Many forces thought of this possibility, but they weren't too angry. After all, the purpose of this trip was to see a fifth-rate sect. Scared? Not coming. Sorry, it was dusk. Sect Master Jun led 200 disciples, accompanied by City Lord Xia and the AI family, to the mountain gate of the Sacred Spring Sect. Who are you? The disciple guarding the gate asked. Swoosh! Jun Changshao showed his waist token with the words, Iron Bone, engraved on it. He gathered qi in his dantian and shouted, Jun Changshao, Sect Master of the Iron Bone Sect, is here to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect. His voice was sonorous and powerful, echoing halfway up the mountain and into the Sacred Spring Sect. He's here, he's here. This Iron Bone Sect Master is standing at the foot of the mountain, but he dares to shout so loudly. He's got guts. If he's a coward, why would he come all the way to the Sacred Spring Sect? I really can't wait. I want to see if this Iron Bone Sect leader has 3 heads or 6 arms. No matter how many heads or arms he has, he's destined to lie down if he dares to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect. All the martial artists discussed. Alliance Master Qin and the leaders of the Alliance, who arrived first, were full of smiles. When they heard the various forces laughing at Jun Changshao, they felt more comfortable than when they broke through. This was a group of pitiful people. Why? Because they couldn't do anything to Iron Bone in the Azure Sun County, so they could only use the discussions of other counties to comfort their long-suppressed souls. If Jun Changshao knew, he would definitely look at them with disdain. Only trash would use such a ridiculous way to comfort themselves. Li Er. Shi Jingxian, who was sitting in the small hall in the inner courtyard, heard Jun Changshao's voice and said with a smile, It's him. He really came. Li Er curled her lips and said, You really dare to come. Before and after coming to the Sacred Spring Sect, she had been telling the Palace Lord that Iron Bone might admit defeat and not dare to challenge them. Ha ha ha. Ma Yuntung, who was playing chess in a side room of the inner courtyard, placed down a chess piece and said with a smile, Sect Master Jun is here. Wang Donglin said, first he challenged the Vast Qi Sect, and now he's challenging the Sacred Spring Sect. This kid is really reckless. Young people. Ma Yunting said, it's not bad to be reckless. Coming. Murong Xian stood by the window of the wing room, complicated emotions rising in her heart. Although Xiao Ziji won the intersect tournament and made her look at him in a new light, wasn't following the Iron Bone Sect leader to challenge the Sacred Spring Sect asking for humiliation? Or could it be that after she broke off the engagement, she no longer cared about anything? AI. Murong Xian sighed. Back mountain of the Sacred Spring Sect. Dai Lu, who was sitting cross-legged in a cave, heard the sound and opened his green eyes. He said coldly, Jun Changshao, you're finally here. Brother Green Scarf accidentally obtained the devouring power at the foot of the Black Eagle sect. He devoured Elder Ghost's cultivation and broke through to the 7th grade martial disciple. After returning to the sect, he participated in the sect's intersect tournament and performed well. He was successfully promoted from an inner disciple to an outer disciple. Of course. He didn't dare to be too high profile, so he concentrated on cultivating. During this period, he absorbed the vitality of many fierce beasts and plants in the back mountain. His cultivation also stepped into the 1st grade martial master from the martial disciple realm. To be honest, the sect limited Dai Lu's development. Because of his special absorption power, he was destined to rely on absorbing external forces to improve. Cultivating step by step would only be very slow. Dai Lu also considered leaving. But when he thought that Jun Changshao would bring disciples to challenge him, he endured for a few months. Destroying my Spirit Springs sect and killing my cousin. With these 2 great enemies, if he didn't do anything and just left like this, wouldn't it be too cowardly? Dai Lu had been planning. He took out the crystal cores he obtained during this period of time and successfully bribed an elder to obtain a challenge quota. Jun Changshao. I want you to know that the current me is not the same as before. I heard that your iron bone is also divided into inner and outer disciples. I will fight with your inner disciple. Even if I can't kill him, I will let him experience what pain is. Brother Green Scarf decided. He wants to challenge an iron bone inner disciple as an outer disciple. After this, he will leave the Holy Spring Sect. From then on, he will be a fish in the sea and a bird in the sky. As for who to challenge, let's wait until the competition starts. Of course, if the sect allows, he will definitely choose the strongest inner disciple. Not only can he defeat Jun Changshao, but he can also show off a bit. Brother Green Scarf, who broke through to the first-grade martial master, was determined to win tomorrow. Because who am I? I am a devourer. He is an iron bone disciple. What qualifications does he have to compete with me? If he really wants to challenge the strongest inner disciple of the iron bone, excluding Lu Qianqian, then it will be Yixingchen. The Devourer vs the Rebirth of the Great Emperor. It seems quite interesting. The premise is that Brother Green Scarf must hold on, because this opponent is not as gentle as Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji. He is very fierce. Kakik. Dai Lu covered his face and laughed strangely. Jun Changshao, you and your disciple are destined to be the stepping stones on my path to become a supreme expert. Sigh. May God bless you, our brother Green Scarf. At the foot of the mountain, Jun Changshao shouted. The Holy Spring Sect's gatekeepers looked at him with disdain. This iron bone disciple is not high level. The sect leader is young, but he is quite arrogant. Humph, one of them said indifferently. Sect leader Jun, our Holy Spring Sect has been waiting for your arrival. Please go up the mountain. Jun Changshao flicked his sleeves and led his disciples up the mountain. Yixingchen walked up the stone steps with an ugly expression. Then, he unwillingly raised the magically modified speaker. Damn it! Why do I have to carry it all the time? Family head Ai, City Lord Xia, and the others also hurried up after reporting their names. Looking at the Iron Bone Sect's disciple who went up the mountain, his aura was as firm and unyielding as ever. Challenging a fifth-rate sect is undoubtedly a hellish test. These Iron Bone disciples can still be so calm. How did sect leader Jun train them? Creak. The gate of the Holy Spring Sect was pushed open. Jun Changshao, wearing dazzling sunglasses, wearing a mink coat, and holding a cigar in his mouth, walked over to the accompaniment of the god of gamblers. In an instant, all the martial artists in the outer yard looked over. TSK, he is quite pretentious. When the competition starts tomorrow, the Holy Spring Sect will be merciful if he can leave standing. Everyone talked in disdain. But when Jun Changshao stood in the martial arts arena, 200 disciples lined up neatly behind him, proudly standing straight and releasing their aura. The expressions of the martial artists froze. These Iron Bone disciples had a strong aura and sharp eyes. As long as one was not short-sighted or blind, they would realize that this was definitely something that only advanced martial disciples had. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Oh my god, an eighth-rate sect, wrong. Jun Changshao held a cigar between his fingers and flashed the certificate given to him by the certification center. He faintly said, if you have a pair of dog eyes like Alliance Master Qin, you might not be able to tell whether it's 8 or 7. He attacked with full force as soon as he arrived. Qin Haoran said angrily, Jun Changshao, you. Jun Changshao raised his middle finger and said indifferently, loser, you are not qualified to bark in front of me. He knew that this guy had come to the Holy Spring Sect before and must have made some dirty deals with them. He also knew that he must have brought the Alliance Master here to see him make a fool of himself. You are not happy with me, and I am not happy with you. I am dissing you, what's the point? Damn it. Qin Haoran was so angry that his eyes were about to pop out. He was so angry that his body was trembling, but he did not speak anymore. After all, he was here to see him make a fool of himself. He could not turn the tables. Shwa! Jun Changshao shook off his mink coat, and a disciple stepped forward to catch it. Sect leader Jun stroked his black hair with one hand and said, my Iron Bones sect came to challenge them, but the Holy Spring sect did not come out to greet them. Is this how a big sect treats its guests? Everyone's mouth twitched. As expected of the sect leader who dared to challenge the Holy Spring sect. This was really crazy. Li Er. Shi Jingxian, who walked out from the inner yard, smiled and said, "Sect leader Jun is so domineering. After seeing the light again, I must see what he looks like." As she spoke, she was already fantasizing in her heart. He must have big eyes, a sharp nose, and long ears. Yes. The sect leader Jun that palace master she imagined had already surpassed the level of a human. Strictly speaking, he could be classified as a monster. Chapter 281. All the cultivators saw Jun Changshao as they wished. He didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, but 2 arms and 2 legs like everyone else. They didn't expect him to attack Alliance Master Qin as soon as he arrived. Many people knew that the two had a grudge. But he was still the leader of a sect. Even if there was a conflict, they couldn't just start a war of words as soon as they met, right? Especially when they heard that this was how a large sect treated their guests, they immediately realized that this 7th-rate sect leader was very arrogant. Yes. If he wasn't arrogant, he wouldn't be arrogant. Would he dare to bring a disciple to challenge the Sacred Spring sect? It was good to be young. They weren't afraid of anything, didn't care about anything, and courted death with all kinds of hot-bloodedness. The disdain in everyone's eyes when they looked at Jun Changshao became even more intense. Little brat. Acting cool would be struck by lightning. Swoosh! At this moment, an old man about 70 years old flew out of the main hall. He landed on the martial arts field and laughed loudly. "Sect leader Jun, we are honored by your presence. Sorry for not coming out to meet you." This person's aura was strong. At first glance, one could tell that he was a high-level Wuzong. Elder Jin, who is in charge of the internal affairs of the Sacred Spring sect. The patriarch of the Sacred Spring sect is in seclusion all year round, so Elder Jin is in charge of all affairs. He is giving Iron Bone enough face to appear in person. In my opinion, this is considered peaceful before resorting to force. Everyone discussed in low voices. They could catch a faint trace of displeasure in Elder Jin's eyes. A low-level sect acting so arrogantly in front of their own sect. If it were them, they would also find it difficult to tolerate. Jun Changshao said indifferently, Iron Bone, came from afar. Doesn't your Sacred Spring sect plan to arrange a place to rest? Really, too arrogant. The disciples of the Sacred Spring sect were all furious. But after all, they were from a large sect and could control their anger. Instead, they thought to themselves, when the challenge starts tomorrow, you won't be so arrogant. Elder Jin said, I have already arranged a room. Lin Feng, take sect leader Jun and Iron Bone disciples there. Yes. Qing Lin Feng walked out and made an inviting gesture. Sect head Jun, please follow me. Jun Changshao went to the inner yard under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The Iron Bone disciples followed behind him. Even though they were being scrutinized by a group of big shots, they were not afraid at all. After they left, the martial artists of various forces began to discuss in low voices. This Iron Bone disciple is not simple. Judging from their auras, they seem to be advanced martial disciples. For a 7th-rate sect to be able to do this, it's truly unbelievable. In my opinion, he might have taken some kind of pill to bluff, right? Hearing such doubts, City Lord Xie sneered in his heart. If you know that 2 elders from the certification headquarters in southwest Yangzhou gave Iron Bone a top 3 grade, you will understand whether it is a bluff or not. City Lord Xie really wanted to tell everyone to stop looking down on others. But because sect leader Jun wanted to keep a low profile, he could only bear with it painfully. The Sacred Spring sect still cared a lot about the style of the sect. They arranged for Iron Bone and the others to stay in several courtyards with beautiful environments. Have a good rest. Jun Changshao said, prepare for tomorrow's battle. Yes. After traveling for thousands of miles, the Ironbone disciples were still a little tired. They all chose their rooms to stay in. Xiao Ziji did not rest. He sat cross-legged in the stone pavilion in the courtyard and practiced the body metamorphosis scripture, continuing to refine his body. Ever since he joined Ironbone and obtained this divine mental cultivation method, he had developed a good habit of practicing anytime and anywhere. Suddenly, Xiao Ziji opened his eyes. He subconsciously looked at the entrance of the courtyard and saw a girl standing outside looking at him. Murong Xin. The inner yard of the Sacred Springs Sect was not small. There was also a beautiful green area for the disciples to enjoy and relax after practicing. In the bamboo forest, Murong Xin pinched a bamboo leaf and said, "You seem to be stronger than last time. Is this why you are looking for me?" Xiao Ziji sat on a huge rock and said indifferently. He was surprised to see this woman in the Sacred Springs Sect, but it was just a surprise. Murong Xin was silent for a while and said, "Your sect master is very reckless. Are you going to follow him?" Xiao Ziji understood. She must think that I, Ironbone, am courting death by challenging the Sacred Springs Sect. Xiao Zuiji said indifferently, "You don't need to worry about my affairs, Miss Murong." Then, he got up and returned to the courtyard. Breaking off the engagement that year was like the last feather that broke the camel's back. It made him sink for 5 years. He really did not want to have too much contact with this woman. Watching Xiao Ziji leave, Murong Xian's eyes flashed with complicated emotions. Every time she saw the man she broke off the engagement with, she would blame herself. She blamed herself for the choices she made when she was young, causing him to bear the pain he should not bear. Judging from Murong Xian's psychological activities, she was not an arrogant woman. She just did the wrong thing at the wrong time. If they were still engaged, according to the customs of the falling star continent, they should have been married by now. There would be another perfect couple in the world. Unfortunately, they were not destined to be together. They missed a marriage. The next day, the weather was clear and there were no clouds in the sky. There was no need to look at the almanac. Because from today's weather, it was very suitable for a competition. Jun Changshao stood outside the martial arts field with his hands behind his back, facing the Sacred Springs Sect's main hall. Behind him, 200 disciples stood tall and straight, showing a sense of arrogance. Various forces had also rushed over and were all secretly amazed. What kind of confidence did this 7th-rate disciple have to be so fearless in front of a 5th-rate sect? Why? Because Ironbone was unyielding. Xie Guanquan, Ai Shang and the others walked behind Jun Changshao tacitly. Song Mountain Sect's Elder Ma and Elder Wang also stood behind, showing their support for Ironbone. No one was surprised. After all, Song Mountain Sect was in the Azure Sun County. It was reasonable for them to support the sects in the county. The positions of the various forces were closer to the main hall, which meant that they believed that the Sacred Springs Sect could win this challenge. Among them were Alliance Master Qin and the leaders of the Alliance. Especially when they looked at Jun Changshao with disdain and sneers. A race between a broken car and a sports car. As long as one had a normal brain, they would believe that the sports car could easily shake off the broken car by stepping on the gas pedal. Ironbone was a broken car. Sacred Springs Sect was a superior sports car. Jun Changshao did not care about the support of the other forces. Because no matter how much they looked down on him, he was still strong. Sect Master Jun, standing opposite him, Elder Jin said, "How do you want to challenge?" Jun Changshao said, "Let's start with the outer disciples. First, we'll fight 30 to 40 rounds and determine the winner." Hearing this, everyone almost fell over. 30 to 40 rounds? This guy. Was he here to challenge or to participate in the sect competition? Jun Changshao also did not want to fight so many rounds. But this damn epic mission, he had to defeat 30 outer disciples of the Sacred Springs Sect to complete it. Chapter 282. Elder Jin's mouth twitched. Sect Master Jun, are you sure you want to waste time and fight so many matches? His Holy Springs sect had 5 to 6,000 outer disciples. Not to mention 30 or 40 matches, they could even send someone for 300 or 400 matches. But fighting one match at a time would definitely waste time. Jun Changshao said, victory and defeat will be decided quickly, it won't take much time. TCH, everyone snorted. That was as if Iron Bone could end the battle quickly. Jun Changshao raised his hand. Shwa! Under everyone's gaze, He walked towards the training field. He was the first outer disciple to represent Iron Bone. To be honest, he was a little nervous. At this time, Lu Wancher shouted, Brother He, do your best. He, who was a little nervous, clenched his fists and straightened his back when he heard Lu Wancher's cheers. Sect Master, let me go first, Du will watch from behind. The first battle, even if I have to risk my life, I must win. Ta! He stopped in the middle of the training field and shouted, Iron Bone Sect disciple Zhang Jilin, please enlighten me. He shouted out a name that even he had almost forgotten. His voice hovered above the training field, revealing a proud aura. Before the battle, Jun Changshao said, your opponents may be strong, but as disciples of Iron Bone Sect, your morale cannot be weak. He remembered it in his heart. When he shouted out his sect, shouted out his name, the blood in his body seemed to burn. I am the first to go. I want to raise the morale of my fellow disciples. I want to win the first battle. The other disciples of Iron Bone also seemed to ignite the blood in their chests under his shout. We came from so far away just to fight for our sect. Seeing that Iron Bone disciple so imposing, all the martial artists shook their heads. There was no denying it. This kid was not bad, but in front of a fifth-rate sect, it was not enough. Elder Jin waved his hand. An outer disciple of Holy Springs Sect walked up. Holy Springs Sect, Lu Yanxiang. The disciple who was going to fight also announced his name, his aura was as strong as his name. Start! The referee shouted. Shwa! Lu Yanxiang rushed over with a profound movement technique, immediately drawing the praises of the martial artists from all sides. This is the Sacred Spring Sect's unique movement technique, 9 steps. It's unbelievable that an outer sect disciple could comprehend it. Then, Brother Iron Bone, boom! While everyone was talking, He gathered his strength in his fist and punched Lu Yanxiang in the face, sending him flying. Plop! He fell to the ground and fainted on the spot. With a single punch, the match was over. Caw! Everyone was silent. The expressions on the faces of the martial artists froze, and their eyes gradually widened. An outer sect disciple of the Sacred Springs Sect was killed by a single punch. Qin Haoran and the others, who were already prepared to see a joke, instantly withdrew the smiles on their faces. Their expressions were extremely ugly. He was also stunned. The outer sect disciples of the Sacred Springs Sect were too weak. They couldn't even take a punch from him. It's not that he's weak, it's that you're too strong. He had already reached the peak of martial disciple level and had been tempered in the forging room and the training tower. The strength of his punch was not comparable to that of an extreme-grade martial disciple, but it was still 20,000 jin. What did that mean? It was comparable to an ordinary grade 2 martial master. What about Lu Yanxiang? He was only an ordinary grade 8 martial disciple. How could he withstand such a powerful force? And this was a Sacred Spring Sect disciple. If it were an outer sect disciple of a 6th or 7th rate sect, he would have been killed by a single punch. Ding! Defeated 130 outer sect disciples of the Sacred Spring Sect. Hearing the notification, Jun Changshao cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you for letting me win. Disciple had killed his opponent and completed a mission goal. It was very satisfying. The martial artists were stunned for a long time. After all, Iron Bone defeated a Sacred Spring Sect disciple with a single punch. It was too unexpected. They understood. Iron Bone's strategy was to let their strongest disciple fight first. If they let their strongest disciple fight in the first round, would they still send anyone for the next 30 or 40 rounds? Alliance Master Qin and the Alliance Elders thought so in their hearts and couldn't help but sneer. Elder Jin furrowed his brows. He was a little careless in the first round and let Iron Bone win first. He would treat it as a friendly host. He didn't have to give Iron Bone any face in the following rounds. If a fifth-rate sect didn't go easy on a seventh-rate sect or two, they would definitely be gossiped about. Let's start the second round. Jun Changshao waved his hand and an outer sect disciple walked out. This person's name was Sun Shao. Because he had a group of monstrous senior brothers, he was considered invisible in Iron Bone. In fact, there were many invisible disciples. Because of the limited space, he couldn't explain it to the camera one by one. Otherwise, he could at least write 3 to 5 chapters. At this kind of climax, there would definitely be readers who would say, 30 to 40 outer sect disciples fighting, one chapter per person, the author can write another 30 to 40 chapters. I want to. But I won't give him a chance. This was because even someone as insignificant as Sun Shao could easily send his opponent flying once the battle began. Seeing the second Sacred Spring Sect disciple fall outside the martial arts practice field, the expressions of the martial art practitioners from various forces froze again. Damn it, another one was killed in seconds. Was the Sacred Spring Sect not serious? Or did Iron Bone continue to send strong outer sect disciples to fight? But that disciple named Sun Shao was only a 7th-grade martial disciple. The Sacred Spring Sect's disciple was a 9th-grade martial disciple. Why? Because Iron Bone's disciples were strong. You let me win. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and said. A trace of anger appeared between Elder Jin's brows. He immediately waved his hand and sent a peak martial disciple to fight. A year ago, Mo Shangfei was only an 8th-grade martial disciple, but he could become an inner sect disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect because he had a high-grade spiritual root. This peak martial disciple only had a middle-grade spiritual root, so he could only be an outer sect disciple. There were many disciples with middle-grade spiritual roots in the Sacred Spring Sect. Although their realms were good, they could only be outer sect disciples because of their spiritual roots. Hey! Jun Changshao said, let's fight. Yes! Hey strode in, his eyes full of fighting spirit. Behind him, Lu Wancher cheered for her fellow disciple as usual. After exchanging names, the battle officially started and then officially ended. Because Hei's strength was not inferior to Hei's, he sent the peak martial disciple flying with a rupturing fist. Decisive and not hesitant. In 3 matches, he was defeated in 3 moves. All the martial artists were deeply shocked by the strength of Iron Bone's disciples. Don't worry. The shock had just begun. Next, the two sides continued to fight. Although the Iron Bone's outer sect disciples were not as talented as the Sacred Spring Sect, their strength was at a high level. As long as they fought, they would win. In a short time, the two sides fought 20 rounds. Although there were more than 2 moves, they still could not reverse the fate of the Sacred Spring Sect's disciples. Ding! Defeated 2,030 outer sect disciples of the Sacred Spring Sect. The system's voice sounded again. Jun Changshao shrugged and said, easy. These words were extremely pretentious. But all the martial artists were silent. 20 disciples fought and defeated 20 outer sect disciples of the Sacred Spring Sect. They were qualified to be pretentious. Chapter 283. Alliance Master Qin and the leaders of the Alliance looked terrible. They were prepared to watch a joke from the beginning, but the Holy Spring Sect's consecutive defeats didn't give them a chance to laugh. This wasn't what they expected at all. As for the various forces that had previously mocked the Iron Bone Sect, their faces were flushed red. After all, if they sent their outer disciples to fight with the Holy Spring Sect, they would be lucky to win 3 out of 30 rounds. Master, standing in the distance, Lear's mouth twitched. Iron Bone won the 20th round. In her estimation, if the Sacred Springs sect fought 30 to 40 rounds, they would definitely win 30 to 40 rounds. But in the end, it was the reverse of the situation. Shi Jingxian smiled. Master Jun's disciples are so strong. Old Ma. Wang Donglin's mouth twitched. These iron bone disciples are too fierce. They didn't lose any of the 20 rounds. Ma Yinton couldn't stay calm at this moment. After all, even if his sect fought with the Holy Springs sect, there would be victories and losses. The challenge continued. Lin Jianghang and other disciples who joined earlier fought and won easily. In the past year, although their spiritual roots didn't change, they all had the strength of advanced martial disciples after various resources and body modifications. What did this mean? It meant that Iron Bone didn't have as many top disciples as the top sects, but their basic disciples were not inferior to them. Once all of them grew up, they would be terrifying. Elder Zhou of the certification headquarters was aware of this, which was why he gave the Iron Bone sect a top 3 evaluation. The strength of a sect wasn't determined by a few people, but by the overall strength. Molding pills, molding rooms, spiritual arrays, training towers, various resources, various martial techniques, these were the powerful assets of Iron Bone's basic disciples. What about the Holy Springs sect? Although it was a fifth-rate sect, its resources were limited and definitely wouldn't be shared with the outer disciples. If the outer disciples wanted to be valued, they had to work hard to be promoted to the inner disciples so that they could enjoy more resources. Which sect's disciple was more fortunate? That's right. It was Iron Bone. Although it was a new sect, although it was only a year old. But the resources Jun Changshao gave his disciples were many years ahead of this kind of sect. Today, I've come all the way here. If I don't give you a good beating, how can I be worthy of all the resources I've piled up? The outer sect disciples of the Sacred Springs sect were either suppressed in terms of realms or their ranks. Although there were occasionally some who could fight with their opponents for 20 or 30 rounds, they were still inevitably defeated. To be honest, it was a complete suppression. Boom! Another Iron Bone disciple sent an outer disciple of the Sacred Springs sect flying. The number of outer disciples defeated in the epic quest increased from 29 to 30. Ding! Disciple defeated an outer disciple of the Sacred Springs sect. Epic mission completion rate, 20%. Host receives 400 contribution points. Ding! Contribution points, 160520000. TSK. Last time, he got 200 points for 20%. This time, he got 400 points. Jun Changshao cupped his fists and said, Elder Jin, after 30 rounds, shall we end the outer disciples competition here? No. Elder Jin said solemnly, continue the battle. If he didn't win a single one of the 30 battles, what face would he have left? He had to continue fighting. Even if he couldn't win all of them, he had to win at least 10 rounds to save his face. The result? Sima Zhongde, Cui Bujian, Lin Jianghang and the other disciples fought one after another. With their powerful strength, they trampled the outer disciples of the Sacred Spring sect one by one. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Boom! An opponent was kicked into the air by Li Tian. Then, he used the cloud steps to hang upside down in the air and directly blasted him 300 meters away. At this point, Iron Bone won the 50th round. Ding! Disciple defeated an outer disciple of the Sacred Spring sect 50-50, meeting the hidden criteria. Epic mission completion rate, 30%. Host receives 200 contribution points. Ding! Contribution points, 180520000. Jun Changshao was startled, then grinned, so, there are still 20 hidden victories. When Li Tian kicked his opponent out and landed on the ground, the expressions on the faces of the martial artists from the various sects were already numb. From the first round to the 50th round, it ended in less than 2 hours. The Sacred Springs sect was completely defeated. Who would have thought that a fifth-rate sect would be so badly beaten by a seventh-rate sect? Elder Jin's hands were trembling. If not for the presence of the various forces, his face would have turned sinister from anger. Ma Yinteng and Wang Donglin were silent. The strength of Iron Bone shocked them deeply. Junior sister. The senior sister standing next to Murong Xian said solemnly, "This is too unbelievable." Her sect had the strength to sweep away the fifth-rate sections. After all, it was a second-rate sect. But a seventh-rate sect did it so cleanly. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, she wouldn't dare to believe it. The Battle of the Outer Disciples. Iron Bone used their strength to ruthlessly slap the faces of the various forces. Fight again. Elder Jean said in a deep voice. Jun Changshao said, "Elder Jean, my Iron Bone doesn't have as many people as your Sacred Spring sect. If we keep fighting like this, isn't it a bit of bullying?" Originally, they planned to send 53 people, but the other party was unwilling to give up, so they could only let the cheering disciples go on stage. If they continued to fight, they would definitely not be able to compete with the thousands of disciples. How about this? Jun Changshao said, "Send the inner disciples to fight." The outer disciples had fought enough, and even the hidden mission was completed. The next step would definitely be to fight the inner disciples. After all, completing the epic mission was more important. Okay. Elder Jean agreed and raised his hand. A man wearing a green scarf walked onto the martial arts practice field. His head was lowered the entire time, and it was obvious that his body was trembling. A moment later, he raised his head and said with a grin, "Jun Changshao, do you still remember me?" Jun Changshao said in surprise, "You are the green scarf man who teased my eldest disciple outside Qingyang City?" The Iron Bone disciple was immediately dumbfounded. Oh my god! He dared to tease the cold big senior sister, his courage was commendable. Cut the crap. Dai Lu raised his hand, pointed at the group of Iron Bone inner disciples with strong auras, and said with a cold gaze, "Send your disciples to fight with me." Ha! Jun Changshao folded his arms and said, "Who do you want to fight?" Humph. Dai Lu proudly said, "Send out the strongest. I want to beat him up and tell everyone here that the Sacred Spring sect is not something that a trash sect like you can afford to offend." After the sect had lost 50 matches in a row, the green scarf brother realized that his chance had come, so he had to perform well in front of Elder Jean. Perhaps this battle would allow him to directly rise from the outer sect to the direct disciple position. At that time, he would have more resources and supplies, so he wouldn't have to consider going out to train. TSK TSK TSK. Jun Changshao, Jun Changshao. You and your disciples are indeed my, Dai Lu's, stepping stones on the path to becoming a supreme expert. The strongest? Jun Changshao began to consider. Yi Xingqian said coldly, "Sect leader, since he wants to find the strongest, this disciple is willing to fight and teach this arrogant green scarf man a lesson." These words caused the mouths of Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others to twitch. "Junior brother Yi, you are stronger than us, but as for the strongest inner sect disciple, without asking big senior sister, do you still have any face?" Chapter 284. Brother Greenscarf was arrogant, directly challenging Iron Bone's strongest inner disciple. Yi Xingqian was very unhappy, so he volunteered to fight, deciding to teach this Greenscarf guy a lesson. However, Jun Changshao said, "Elder Jean, is he an inner disciple?" Sect Master Jun, Elder Jean said calmly, "Although this old man's disciple is an outer disciple, he already has the strength of an inner disciple." Jun Changshao frowned. "You said you would send an inner disciple, but you sent an outer disciple. How can I complete my task?" Jun Changshao. Dai Lu said calmly, "You don't dare to send an inner disciple to fight with me?" This kid is quite arrogant." Jun Changshao thought for a while and said, "Xingqian, fight." Although it was a bit disadvantageous to send an inner disciple to fight an outer disciple, he couldn't bear to see the green scarf guy so arrogant. The best way to deal with this kind of person was to let someone more arrogant than him teach him a lesson. Who was the most arrogant in Iron Bone? Without a doubt, it was Night Emperor. Swoosh! Yi Xingqian stepped forward, clenching his fists and shaking his head. He said eerily, a grown man wearing a green scarf, you really don't mind your head being green. Dai Lu sneered, green represents nature, what do you know? What do I know? Yi Xingqian stood in the middle of the training field, his eyes cold. Kid, when the fight starts, I will make you suffer. That's what I want to say too. Dai Lu smiled evilly. The referee said, both sides, please report your names. Yi Xingqian said calmly, Iron Bone Disciple, Yi Xingqian. Not only did he report his name, he also reported his sect. This was very rare. Actually, even he didn't understand why he had to report his sect. If he had to give a reason, Yi Xingqian felt that since he had come to challenge a fifth-rate sect, he should give face to his own sect master. Disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect, Dai Lu. Dai Lu said. At this point, the reincarnation of the Great Emperor was only a few meters away from the Devourer. A battle to determine who was the main character was about to begin. Who? Dai Lu completely unleashed his martial master aura as a proud expression appeared on his face. Ever since he returned from the Black Eagle Mountain, he had been suppressing his cultivation. Even in the sect's small competition, he had only revealed a little. Today, with so many forces watching, it was the perfect opportunity to act tough. Naturally, there was no need for him to hide. He wanted to win the favor of the upper echelons of the sect. As expected. When Dai Lu released his martial master cultivation, the upper echelons of the Sacred Springs sect were astonished. Especially Elder Jean. It was only because he had accepted a bribe that he was allowed to go on stage. Who would have thought that he would be given such a pleasant surprise? The disciples of the Sacred Springs sect were also dumbfounded. It was hard to believe that a disciple who had only been in the sect for a year was already a martial master. The outer sect disciples of the Sacred Springs sect have all broken through to martial master. As expected of a major sect. They didn't send him out just now because they wanted to save him for later. The martial artists from various forces were shocked. Dai Lu, who had completely unleashed his martial master cultivation, heard the crowd talking about him and the pride on his face became even stronger. It felt so good to be in the limelight. At this moment, Brother Green Scarf was even more arrogant. With his aptitude, he would never attract attention in his lifetime, let alone achieve much. After awakening the devouring power, his strength had skyrocketed. Naturally, he would be arrogant. However, when Dai Lu revealed his martial master cultivation, Yi Xingqian's eyes were full of disdain. I was wondering how strong this arrogant guy was. It turned out that he was only a grade 1 martial master. What a piece of trash. Begin. The referee shouted. Dai Lu smiled sinisterly and said, swish. Yi Xingqian used the cloud-treading steps and appeared in front of Dai Lu at an extremely fast speed. He said in a cold voice, have you experienced the feeling of living a life worse than death? Dai Lu's smile froze as fear appeared in his eyes. Boom! The sound of a fist rang out and a gust of wind swept across. Everyone's eyes widened. This guy called Yi Xingqian, the aura he released when he attacked was actually that of a martial master. And from the looks of it, it was more than grade 2 or 3. Ding! Defeated 110 inner disciples of the Sacred Springs sect. A notification sounded in his ears. Jun Changshao was startled and said, how can an outer disciple be counted as an inner disciple? The system said, because the mission determined that the outer disciple of the Sacred Springs sect, Dai Lu, is equal to an inner disciple. I see. Jun Changshao said, quite smart. However, Yi Xingqian defeated that arrogant Dai Lu with one punch. Wasn't he too weak? On the martial arts field, the air waves gradually dissipated. Brother Green Scarf was lying on the ground, his body twitching violently. Swish! Yi Xingqian walked over and stepped on his face. He said coldly, brat, stand up and be arrogant. This scene was familiar. Not bad. At the beginning of the book, Jun Changshao stepped on his face and persuaded him to join the Iron Bone clan. In the end, he refused and was beaten up. First, he was stepped on by a transmigrator. Now, he was stepped on by a reborn emperor. How pitiful. Dai Lu wasn't unconscious. He was still thinking. His eyes were filled with fear. He had obtained the devouring power in his first battle to show off, but he was beaten to the point of losing his ability to fight. Impossible. Impossible. I have the devouring power and my cultivation level increases quickly. How can an Iron Bone clan disciple be so strong? How can he defeat me? Dai Lu didn't understand. This was the huge gap between their strength. Not to mention Yixingchen, even Zhang Wei and the others could easily defeat him. Unless, he used the devouring power. However, during this time, Dai Lu only studied how to absorb plants and beasts. He couldn't absorb martial artists as he wished. Later, he remembered the scene when he absorbed Elder Ghost. He guessed that if he wanted to absorb a human's spiritual energy, he could only activate it in a life and death situation. It wasn't dangerous enough now. It wasn't desperate enough. Because of this, although Dai Lu's face was stepped on, he still mocked with difficulty, You only have this much strength? Yixingchen frowned slightly. A piece of trash under his feet dared to mock him. Whoosh! Yixingchen lifted his foot and said calmly, Then I'll show you what strength is. Boom! He stepped on Dai Lu's face, making him spit out a mouthful of blood. Very good. Torture me with all your strength. Put me in a desperate situation and make me fight to survive. When the devouring power is activated, I'll take all the spiritual energy in your body. Bang! 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 Yixingchen stepped on Dai Lu a few more times, making him dizzy and spitting out blood. However, he still couldn't activate the devouring power. It wasn't miserable enough. It wasn't even close to death. Even though his face was covered in footprints, Dai Lu still tried to grin to provoke Yixingchen, who had a bad temper. Brat! How dare you laugh after being tortured like this? You're really arrogant. Yixingchen continued to step on Dai Lu's face, making the spectators' mouths twitch violently. Was the Sacred Spring Sect's disciple crazy? He had obviously lost his ability to fight, but he still used his smile to provoke his opponent and beat him up? They didn't understand. This was Dai Lu's strategy, to explode in a desperate situation. Needless to say, as Yixingchen stepped on Dai Lu's face again and again, his injuries became more serious. Suddenly, a strange aura emerged from Greenscarf Brother's body, and his eyes gradually turned green. Together with his ferocious face, he looked a little scary. It's coming, it's coming. My terrifying devouring power that can absorb martial artists. Bang! Yixingchen stepped on Dai Lu again. Blood spurted out from Dai Lu's mouth. Just as the attributes in his body were about to surge, his thoughts and body were suddenly interrupted. He couldn't bear the torture and fainted. Gah! The aura in his body was like a flood. Following its master's fainting, it retreated like a tide, finally hiding in his blood and meridians. Everything returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. If Dai Lu still had his thoughts, he would definitely cry. After suffering so much damage, he was about to make a desperate counterattack. How could he faint? Boom! Yixingchen kicked the fainted Dai Lu out of the arena and said indifferently, Your Sacred Spring Sect dares to send this kind of trash. Are you sure you're not asking to be humiliated? Chapter 285. Dai Lu's strategy was correct. When he was in a desperate situation, he could activate the devouring power. But first, he had to survive this desperate situation. Facing Yixingchen's fierce kicks, Brother Green Scarf couldn't stabilize his state of mind and fainted. The devouring power that was about to erupt was immediately retracted. So, he was beaten up for nothing, but he didn't have the chance to fight back. It had to be said. This was a great tragedy. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, I thought he was strong, but he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Elder Jin was so angry that his body was trembling. He let Dai Lu fight, but he was defeated in one move and was stepped on repeatedly. It was a disgrace to the Sacred Spring Sect. There was no other way. Yi Xingqian was too strong. Even if he sent Qing Linfeng, he would also lose. The only consolation was that he used an outer disciple to exhaust the strongest disciple of the Iron Bone sect. Elder Jin waved his hand. An inner disciple walked onto the martial arts field, his eyes flashing with anger. No disciple of the Sacred Spring sect could tolerate the defeat of so many of his fellow disciples, so he had to win. Jun Changshao said, "Yuhua, go." Yes. Yang Yuhua stepped forward. Iron Bone sect disciple, Yang Yuhua. Sacred Spring sect disciple, Qi Fan. Begin. The referee said. Swish. Qi Fan attacked first, performing the 36 Paths of Heaven fist, which instantly transformed into fist shadows. He was a senior inner disciple of the Sacred Spring sect and had an upper-grade spiritual root. Although he was only a first-grade martial master, his fist technique and aura were obviously much stronger than Dai Lu. The strength of each punch is at least 40,000 pounds. This is the real inner disciple of the Sacred Spring sect. The Iron Bone sect disciples are unlucky. Swish! Yang Yuhua staggered her steps and crossed her arms. It was clear that she wanted to use her body to resist. Seeing this, everyone shook their heads. 36 Paths of Heaven fist was a unique fist technique of the Sacred Spring sect. Once performed, it would form an endless momentum. If one chose to defend, they would definitely fall into an absolute passive state. Bang! 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 The shadows of the fists were like cannonballs as they bombarded him. Although each attack carried a force of around 40,000 Jin, Yang Yuhua, who had taken the brunt of the attacks, stood on the spot and did not move an inch. He didn't even open the seal barrier, it was effortless. Everyone's eyes widened. The Iron Bone disciples would be fine even if they were forced to take half a step back. Qi Fan, who had performed a set of fist techniques, was also stunned. Even if it was a huge beast with rough skin and thick flesh, it would still be forced back a few steps under his crazy bombardment. Shwa! Yang Yuhua took advantage of the other's stupefied state to attack with a rupturing fist. This punch was very fast, so fast that Qi Fan could only cross his arms to defend himself. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Yang Yuhua's fist, which was imbued with spiritual energy, came crashing down. Bang! Qi Fan took the brunt of the attack and was sent flying backwards. His face was contorted as intense pain spread through his arms. Yang Yuhua, a second-grade martial master, with the support of the rupturing fist, could punch out with a force of 55,000 Jin. How could a rank 1 martial master receive such an attack? Thump, thump, thump. Qi Fan staggered back until he was out of the arena. When he stabilized his body with difficulty, his legs gave out and he knelt on the ground. Ding! Defeated 210 inner disciples of the Sacred Spring sect. The spectating martial artists' mouths twitched. It was hard to accept that an inner disciple was sent flying with a single punch. Qin Haoran and the leaders of the alliance were also dumbfounded. How could an unranked sect have so many powerful disciples in a short span of a year? Elder Jin was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. In front of their own sect, in front of all the forces, they lost 52 matches. No one could control their emotions. Sigh. Jun Changshao said, "Xianzhou, go on stage." Yes. Song Xianzhou walked onto the arena and stood there proudly. The Sacred Spring sect sent another inner disciple, who was also a rank 1 martial master. In a fifth-rate sect, there were 2 ways to become an inner disciple. One was to have an excellent spirit root, and the other was to be strong. The second way was to become a martial master. If the spirit root was good and the cultivation level was high, they would be a direct disciple. Of course. A disciple with a good spirit root would gradually become stronger. For example, The rank 8 martial disciple Mo Shangfei, who was defeated by Li Qingyang at the Spirit Spring Mountain, became a rank 2 martial master in a year. Unfortunately, it was too slow. Li Qingyang was only a rank 4 martial disciple at that time. Now, not only did he have an excellent spirit root, he also had the cultivation of a rank 5 martial master. With this comparison, the gap between them was not small. That Iron Bone disciple is a martial disciple. The Sacred Springs Sect sent a martial master, he should be able to get the first victory. Everyone discussed in low voices. It was possible to fight against someone of a higher level in the same realm, but it was very difficult to win against someone of a higher level. Old Man Song's heart was in his mouth. His son had just recovered from his paralysis. It was too dangerous for him to fight against a martial master as a martial disciple. However, after the match began, Song Xianzhou relied on the sect's various martial techniques to suppress his opponent in all aspects in a short time. Especially when he took the opportunity to use the mountain-splitting palm, his explosive strength had reached 30,000 jin. His opponent's explosive strength was only 25,000 jin. Old Man Song's face went blank as he felt the spiritual energy emanating from Zhang Xian's palm strike. My son. Is he that strong? Boom! Song Xianzhou went to the back and used the exploding fist continuously, directly blasting the Sacred Spring Sect disciple, who was one level higher than him, out of the training field. Although he was not as clean as his senior brothers, he had suppressed his opponent from the beginning to the end. This was enough to prove that he was a once-in-a-century genius after he stood up from his paralysis and trained hard in the Iron Bone Sect. Looking at his son defeating his opponent and looking at his back, Old Man Song could not control himself and his hands trembled with excitement. Song Xianzhou defeated a rank 1 martial master as a peak martial disciple. Not only did he prove himself, but he also told the spectators that the Iron Bone Sect disciples could surpass their level. The Sacred Spring Sect's upper echelon had an extremely ugly expression. And this was destined to continue to be ugly, because Zhang Wei and the others who were stronger than Song Xianzhou went up one after another and defeated the inner disciples of the Sacred Spring Sect. Ding! Defeated 1010 Sacred Spring Sect inner disciples. Ding! Disciple defeated an inner disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect. Epic mission completion rate 50%. Host receives 400 contribution points. Ding! Contribution points, 220520000. Ding! Sect contribution points overflow. Jun Changshao was very pleased with his disciple's strong performance, so he opened the purchased items column and spent 500 contribution points to buy 10 bottles of aptitude-changing liquid. After the battle, he would give it to the disciples who had gained face for the sect. He could not give each disciple a bottle for the time being, but he would definitely record their achievements and reward them in the future. The outer disciples of the Iron Bone Sect were already very strong in this 1 year of cultivation. If they were to improve their spirit roots, they would be even more terrifying. Elder Jean. Jun Changshao said, "Do you want to continue?" Elder Jean did not say anything and only waved his hand with a gloomy face. An inner disciple with the strength of a rank 3 martial master walked out again. This meant that he wanted to continue the battle. Jun Changshao naturally would not back down and let Long Xiang fight. The most troublesome thing was, it was already the 61st battle, and only Yi Xingchen from the Iron Bone Sect had fought. The others had not yet gone up. Boom! Long Xiang, who was the strongest among the outer disciples, cleanly defeated his opponent and won the 11th battle of the inner disciples. The spectators were calm. In the 61 battles, the Iron Bone Sect had won 61 battles. Their minds and muscles were already numb. Chapter 286. The inner sect battle continued and Jun Changshao sent out Ling Yuanxue for the next battle. Although the girl was a bit timid, she used rupturing fist and splitting mountain palm at the start of the battle. She sent her opponent flying as if she was trying to kill a master. Then she fought 2 more battles. At this point, all the outer sect disciples who went to Death Valley, except for Zhou Hong, fought and defeated their opponents, raising the total number of victories to 64. The corners of the mouths of the various forces twitched violently. Before the battle began, who would have thought that it was not Iron Bone that was defeated, but Sacred Spring Sect? Too scary! Ma Yinting exclaimed. The disciples brought by Jun Changshao, even if his Tsang Mountain sect disciples came to fight, they would definitely be defeated one after another. Shi Jingxian smiled. Like I said, if sect leader Jun's Iron Bone didn't have the strength, how would they dare to challenge Sacred Spring Sect? Lier was completely silent. 64 victories, even her Miaohua palace couldn't do it. Murong Xian whispered, so his sect is so strong. Humph, senior sister said lightly, it's a fifth-rate sect, how could it be so weak, what a disgrace. She still didn't understand, it wasn't that Sacred Spring Sect was weak, it was that Iron Bone was too strong. Next, there was no need to fight anymore, because the Sacred Spring Sect that lost 64 battles not only lost the face of a fifth-rate sect, but also lost their underwear. However, Elder Jean sent another disciple to fight. This inner sect disciple looked to be almost 30 years old, and his strength was at the level of a fourth-grade martial master. During this time, it wasn't that Sacred Spring Sect didn't send any fourth-grade martial masters, but they still lost to Iron Bone's second-grade martial master disciple. Facing a group of freaks with all kinds of resources, without an absolute level suppression, it was impossible to win. Jun Changshao originally planned to send Tian Qi to fight. Ma Yongning volunteered, sect leader, please let me fight. First Black and Second Black both came out, making Lu Wancher very happy. He already couldn't hold back his desire to fight. Jun Changshao said, all right. Shua. Ma Yongning stepped into the martial arts field. He was still hugging the saber that had been cut off and reattached. He said proudly, let's fight with weapons. The Sacred Spring Sect disciple looked at Elder Jean, and after receiving his instructions, he took out his 3-foot-long sword. Disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect, Lan Jing. Iron Bone Clan's disciple, Ma Yongning. After reporting their names, the martial artists from the various sects were a little speechless. The two of them were so old, especially the Iron Bone's Ma Yongning. He looked like he was almost 40 or 50 years old, but he was still a disciple. How poor was he? I'm only 29. Who the hell is 40 or 50 years old? Ma Yongning said, when the match starts, you make the first move. Because once my saber is unsheathed, you won't have a chance. Lan Jing, this middle-aged man was really arrogant. Begin. The referee shouted. Clang. Lan Jing unsheathed his long sword and dashed forward. In the process, his wrists shook and in an instant, intricate sword flowers were intertwined. Tidal wave sword technique. This is an upper-grade sword skill. Everyone exclaimed. Facing the wave-like sword flowers, Ma Yongning smiled faintly. He put down his saber and placed his right hand on the hilt. Whoosh whoosh. In an instant, a thick and heavy saber intent permeated around him, emitting a desolate aura that seemed to come from the North Desert. This saber intent, an expert exclaimed, he's a saber cultivator. What? Everyone widened their eyes. Saber cultivators and sword cultivators were very rare in the Falling Star continent. Clang. At this moment, Ma Yongning took a step forward and unsheathed his saber, which had obvious signs of repair. The desolate aura instantly exploded like a sandstorm. Saber of the North Desert. Whoosh! The saber aura whizzed out and shattered the wave-like sword flowers with a strong momentum. Oh no! Lan Jing's eyes were filled with horror. He hurriedly retreated outside the arena. Boom! The thick saber aura slashed on the stone floor, leaving a 5-meter-long saber mark. Lan Jing, who had escaped outside the arena, was so shocked that he broke out in cold sweat. Ma Yongning's saber was not meant to hurt anyone. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape. Instead, he would have been split open. Iron Bone won another round. At this time, the various forces did not care about the 65 victories. What they cared about was that the seemingly old Iron Bone disciple was actually a saber cultivator. Jun Changshao was also a little stunned. He had fought with Ma Yongning before, and he was not this strong at that time. Wow! Lu Wancher exclaimed excitedly, so powerful. Hearing the little girl's words, Ma Yongning slowly sheathed his saber. The pride of a saber cultivator appeared on his face. Ding! Disciple defeated 15 inner disciples of the Holy Spring Sect, meeting the hidden criteria. Epic mission completion rate, 60%. Host receives 200 contribution points. Ding! Sect contribution points, 190520000. It seemed that to meet the hidden criteria, he had to defeat a few more people in addition to the original number of people he had defeated. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and said, Elder Jean, I'm sorry. I won another round by luck. Everyone collapsed. Great leader Jun, you Iron Bone won 65 rounds by luck. You almost made the Holy Spring Sect cry. Elder. Qing Linfeng couldn't bear it anymore and said, Disciple requests to fight. Elder Jean suppressed his endless anger and placed high hopes on Qing Linfeng. Linfeng, you must win. Yes. Qing Linfeng walked onto the stage and stopped in the center, his expression incomparably dignified. He couldn't accept that his junior brother had lost 65 rounds, so he had to win this battle no matter what. The Holy Spring Sect's direct disciple is fighting. We should have sent him earlier to raise the morale of the disciples later. Judging from his aura, young Master Linfeng is at least a 6th grade martial master. Tisk TSK, an extreme martial master of this level has to have at least 80,000 gene of strength. When Qing Linfeng entered the stage, the various factions finally realized that the Holy Spring Sect had to take this seriously. If Elder Jean knew what they were thinking, he would definitely vomit blood. Our Holy Spring Sect had already taken this battle seriously, but we couldn't win at all. Humph. Alliance Master Qin coldly said, Young Master Linfeng has a supreme-grade spiritual root and is also an extreme-grade martial master. Not to mention a disciple of the Iron Bone Sect, even if that Jun Changshao were to fight, he would be ruthlessly beaten up. Finally, there's a good show to watch. The Long Blade Sect Master and the Alliance Master laughed. In 65 rounds, the Iron Bone disciples had won 65 rounds, which made them feel disappointed. Now that Qing Linfeng was going to fight and exuded a strong aura, they were immediately energized. But, even if they could win one round, it would be in vain. This guy is not weak. Jun Changshao held his chin and thought for a while before saying, Zoe Ji, you go and meet him. Yes. Xiao Ziji walked over. Standing in the middle of the stage, he said, Iron Bone Sect, Xiao Ziji. Xiao Ziji. All the martial artists were startled and looked at Morong Xian, who was watching the battle from afar. Junior sister. The senior sister was also surprised. Could this Xiao Zueji be your former fiancé? She asked. Morong Xian didn't say anything. Her bright eyes were fixed on the man standing proudly on the stage. She thought to herself, your fellow disciple is very strong. What about you? Chapter 287. Could this young man be Xiao Ziji, who was divorced by the genius of the Morong family? That's him. I heard that last year, he represented the Iron Bone Sect in the Azure Sun County Great Sect competition and won the championship. Didn't he become a trash? Could it be that Morong Xian came to the Sacred Spring Sect to see her divorced fiancé? She is now a second-rate disciple of the Lily Holy Sect, while Xiao Ziji is in the 7th-rate Iron Bone Sect. The two are destined to be in different worlds. Divorced by a woman, what a disgrace. Although the martial artists from various forces were discussing in low voices, every word was clearly heard by Xiao Ziji, making him clench his fists. Morong Xian frowned. Why are these people so talkative? Xiao Ziji turned his head, with a faint indifference in his eyes, as if telling her. Did you hear that? This is the harm you brought to me back then. Yes. You can use your ignorance to shirk your responsibility back then. But as a man, how can I make up for the dignity trampling on me? Murong Xian did not dare to look into Xiao Ziji's eyes, because looking into those indifferent eyes would only make her feel more guilty. Phew! Xiao Ziji exhaled. Just as the sect leader once said, he must take back what he lost with his own hands. What he lost was a man's dignity. How can he take it back? 2 years later, he will ascend to the Lily Holy Sect, stand in front of those high and mighty people, take out a divorce letter, and divorce this woman who brought endless humiliation to him. Not convinced? Then let's fight. Disciple of the Sacred Springs Sect, Qing Linfeng. Qing Linfeng reported his name, and then said, I sympathize with you. This was true sympathy, not ridicule. In a world where men were dominant, being divorced by a woman would definitely bring a fatal blow to his dignity. Xiao Ziji smiled and said, actually, I am very grateful to that woman. If she did not break the engagement back then, Xiao Ziji would not be where I am today. He paused for a moment. Swoosh! He clenched his fists and said proudly, I won't become a disciple of Iron Bone Clan either. The faces of his fellow disciples behind him were also filled with pride. They were very glad that they had become Iron Bone Clan's disciples. They were able to stand here and challenge the insurmountable mountain. Jun Changxiao's efforts were not in vain. The disciples had a strong sense of belonging to Iron Bone. Begin. The referee said. Shua! Qing Linfeng formed a seal with both hands. His spirit energy whizzed out and formed a large palm that swept over with great force. Spirit Gathering Seal. Within the Sacred Springs Sect, only the upper echelons and direct disciples could learn a high-grade martial skill. Huff! The palm imprint whizzed down from above, and the strength it carried increased rapidly, directly breaking through the 50,000 gene mark. So powerful! Everyone exclaimed. With the support of his martial arts technique, his strength was comparable to that of an ordinary first-class Wuzong. This was the strength of a direct disciple of the Holy Springs Sect. The senior sister standing beside Murong Xian said faintly, Qing Linfeng is not bad. How can that guy compete with him? Her tone sounded as if she was praising a disciple of a fifth-rate sect, and that person should feel honored. It couldn't be helped. The disciples of a second-rate sect were naturally arrogant. When Murong Xian brought the people of the Lily Holy Sect to break off the engagement, facing the Xiao family and Xiao Ziji, her arrogance was even stronger. Ta! When the palm imprint was about to press down, Xiao Ziji took a step forward and bent his body slightly. The spirit energy in the cyclone madly surged and gathered in his right fist. Bang! Explosive fist was used to meet the attack head-on. Boom! The moment the fist and the large palm imprint collided, a powerful wave of air whizzed out and swept away the surrounding dust. Thump! 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 Xiao Ziji and Qing Linfeng both retreated 5 steps before stabilizing at the same time. All the martial artists widened their eyes. The Iron Bone disciple and the Sacred Springs Sect's direct disciple were actually not at a disadvantage. Wang Donglin said solemnly, although that kid is only a 5th-grade martial master, he is also an extreme martial master. From the initial exchange of blows, all the martial artists could see that Xiao Ziji was also an extreme martial master. Their mouths twitched violently. To reach the extreme level, the most basic requirement was to have an extreme spiritual root. How could the Iron Bone sect have such a valiant disciple? Murong Xian's bright eyes flashed with surprise. His extreme spiritual root has recovered. You! Qing Linfeng said solemnly, very strong. Swoosh! Xiao Ziji rushed over with the cloud-treading step. His left and right arms used the explosive fist and mountain-splitting palm respectively. A powerful aura burst out, forming waves of wind. Boom! Boom! In an instant, the 2 extreme martial masters exchanged dozens of blows, each with a force of 50,000 pounds. The battle was magnificent. This was definitely the most exciting battle since the start of the challenge. Because the Iron Bone disciple was basically one-sided, there was no such thing as a draw. All the martial artists were dumbfounded. They had thought that the Holy Spring Sect's direct disciple would be able to crush the Iron Bone Sect. Who would have thought that the disciple they sent was no weaker than Qing Linfeng? Today, the strength of the Iron Bone faction's disciples had completely refreshed their understanding of the Iron Bone faction. It had also thoroughly slapped them in the face countless times. Bang! Boom! Xiao Ziji's moves were bold, the explosive fist and mountain-splitting palm were frequently used. Although he was one stage lower than Qing Linfeng in terms of cultivation level, his strength was no less than his opponent's. This came from martial arts techniques. Although the explosive fist and mountain-splitting palm were not as high as high-grade martial arts techniques, as long as they were comprehended to the extreme, they could provide powerful combat strength. Boom! Boom! Both sides exchanged more than 10 blows. Qing Linfeng retreated more than 10 steps, his expression changing slightly. His arms that bore the brunt of the force were numb. Xiao Ziji stood in place with a calm expression. Their strength was on par, but in terms of physical strength, Qing Linfeng was far inferior. Swoosh! Cloud-treading step was used. Xiao Ziji launched a new round of attacks and the strength he released was as strong as ever. This guy seems to be risking his life from the start. Can his body take it? As long as Qing Linfeng stabilizes the situation, he'll definitely exhaust him. Although he's on par with young Master Linfeng, he only knows how to explode. One look and you can tell that he's a boorish man who hasn't experienced actual combat. Jun Changshao laughed when he heard what everyone said. A bunch of fools. My disciple is playing like this because he's strong and willful. You guys have no right to comment here. Xiao Ziji's body wasn't just a little bit stronger. Not only did he not feel the slightest bit of fatigue, he became more courageous as he fought. Qing Linfeng naturally knew that if he dragged on and exhausted his spirit energy, he would have a chance of winning. But the prerequisite was, he had to be able to hold on until Su Zimo was exhausted. For now, Xiao Ziji was getting more and more courageous. Qing Linfeng was gradually at a disadvantage. Holding on for more than 10 minutes was his limit. No, he had to find a chance to defeat the enemy in one blow. Swoosh! Qing Linfeng took advantage of the gap in Xiao Ziji's attack and retreated quickly. Then, he leaped into the air and quickly formed a seal, shouting, "Grand Spirit Gathering Seal." Huff huff. Violent spiritual energy burst out from his body, instantly condensing into a thick and heavy palm print that was 5 or 6 meters wide. Then, it mercilessly pressed down on Xiao Zuiji. Chapter 288. Grand Spirit Gathering Seal. This is one of the few supreme-grade martial arts techniques of the Sacred Spring Sect. A disciple can actually use it. When Qing Linfeng condensed a heavy palm print, the martial artists from various factions exclaimed. Elder Jin's brows relaxed, and a rare smile finally appeared on his face. The personal disciple has used his trump card, and the battle is over. Our Sacred Spring Sect has finally won the first battle. Although it's a little late, at least we can win back face among the top disciples. Whoosh whoosh, the Grand Spirit Gathering Seal pressed down with a heavy momentum, with a force of more than 150,000 pounds, and a gust of wind blew the hair and clothes of the martial artists closest to the battle. They all held their breaths in shock. To be able to break free from the intensive attack and use a powerful palm print, the Sacred Spring Sect's personal disciple was really strong. Wang Donglin's eyes were solemn. The power of the Grand Spirit Gathering Seal is comparable to that of a 5th-class Wuzong. It's dangerous, Ma Yinting said. When Qing Linfeng condensed a powerful palm print, the martial artists from various factions who were watching the show believed that Xiao Ziji was in for a bad time. Perhaps this battle would also end. But Jun Changshao didn't think so. He wasn't worried about his disciple at all. Stomp! Xiao Ziji stomped on the ground, and his muscles instantly strengthened. Then, he met the palm print with both hands, holding up the sky. He was going to take it head-on. Arrogant. How can such a powerful palm print be resisted by the fleshly body? Isn't he afraid of being crushed to pieces? The powerhouses from various factions shook their heads. If he was stronger than Qing Linfeng, he could take it head-on with his body. But if he was one class lower, taking a 150,000-pound palm print was undoubtedly asking for humiliation. He's too reckless. Morong Xayan frowned. Even if Xiao Ziji could take the Grand Spirit Gathering seal, he would definitely be injured. How would he deal with the enemy? The wisest choice was to dodge and continue to exhaust his opponent. Only then could he have a chance of winning. Both sides were evenly matched. Exhausting his opponent was the right choice. To take the opponent's trump card head-on was definitely a boorish man. Senior sister said lightly, with this method of fighting, sooner or later he will die miserably. No wonder junior sister broke off the engagement with him. Whoosh whoosh, the Grand Spirit Gathering seal came crashing down and the martial arts practice field turned dark. Xiao Ziji stood below with his palms clasped together, giving off a feeling of insignificance. Come on, come on. His gaze sharpened, and his muscles bulged once again. Every single one of them seemed to have been tempered 1,000 times. Unfortunately, he was wearing his school uniform, so the martial artists from the various factions could not see him. Even if they saw him, they would not care, because all their attention was on the palm print that was pressing down. Boom! The heavy spirit gathering seal pressed down fiercely. The moment it came into contact with Xiao Ziji's palm, an even stronger wave of wind was created. The cultivators nearby all retreated a few steps, their faces filled with shock. Caw caw caw. Many of the stone slabs on the martial arts practice field were shattered. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. Just the spiritual energy wave alone was enough to shatter the stone floor. The power of a martial master was truly terrifying. However, the experts from the various forces stabilized their bodies and resisted the raging winds. They raised their eyes to look at the battlefield, and their expressions all froze. Xiao Ziji's hands were already supporting the Great Spirit Gathering seal. Although the stone slabs under his feet were shattered into pieces, his body was perfectly straight. He actually took it. How is that possible? Senior sister's eyes were filled with disbelief. Even Murong Xian next to her was very surprised. She had thought that Xiao Ziji could take it, but she did not expect it to be so easy. The experts from the various factions were also stunned. That was a palm print with a force of 150 kilograms. He did not even bend his body after taking it. How strong was his body? Everyone was shocked. Jun Changshao and the Iron Bone disciple were smiling. Qing Linfeng's strength was not bad, but Xiao Ziji was tempered by gravity in the experience tower all day long. Want to suppress him? Impossible. Whoosh! Qing Linfeng landed on the ground and maintained the strength of the palm print. Shock rose in his heart. The strength of his palm was comparable to that of a 5th-grade ordinary martial master. It was unbelievable that his opponent could take it so easily. Whoosh! He leaped into the air again, forming a second Great Spirit Gathering seal and pressing it down. The second palm. This is too awesome! Everyone exclaimed. The fact that the Sacred Springs Sect's disciple could form such a powerful trump card shocked all the martial artists from the various factions. It's over. Elder Jean thought with absolute certainty. He did not believe that a 5th-grade martial master could withstand 2 Great Spirit Gathering seals with a force of 150 kilograms. Morong Xian frowned and said, "It's not too late to retreat now." Ah! Xiao Ziji shouted angrily. His school uniform was torn to shreds, revealing his strong muscles. Don't ask why his pants were not shredded, because that would be indecent. Boom! The second Great Spirit Gathering seal pressed down on the first palm. 150 kilograms of force merged with the first, forming a crushing force. Crack, crack, crack. The combination of spiritual power and strength created an oppressive force, shattering the stone slabs in the martial arts arena and rolling up stone foam and dust. The crowd could not see the situation in the battle area, but they were sure that the Iron Bone disciple had been suppressed by the two palms. The expressions of the experts from the various forces turned solemn. When the palm print pressed down, they could clearly see Xiao Ziji's strong muscles, giving them the feeling of an iron wall. Maybe he could take it again. As expected. When the dust dissipated, everything became clear. Xiao Zuiji's spine was still as firm as steel. His hands were holding the stacked great energy-gathering seal. Crack! The whole arena was silent. Elder Jean and the other martial artists were dumbfounded. Phew! At this moment, Xiao Ziji lowered his arms and bent down. Ha ha ha, he can't take it anymore. He's going to be suppressed. The leader of the Long Blade faction laughed. Qin Haoren and the others were also smiling. Although Xiao Ziji's performance had shocked them, he was still suppressed and defeated by Qin Linfeng. Elder Jean also laughed. But as soon as he rose, his smile froze. Ah! After bending down to a certain extent, Xiao Ziji stood up with blue veins popping out on his muscles. Swoosh! In an instant, he stood up again, and with a burst of power, he directly pushed out the Grand Spirit Gathering seal on his hands. Everyone's eyes were about to pop out. It turned out that the guy bent down not because he could not take it anymore, but because he wanted to use it as a buffer to push out the two palms. The faces of Qin Haoren and the others were almost smashed by the invisible force. After all, it was funny to laugh at Xiao Ziji when they saw that he could not take it anymore. Swoosh! When the palms were pushed out, Qin Linfeng landed on the ground with a pale face. Performing 2 Grand Spirit Gathering seals in a row might have been impressive, but it had consumed a lot of stamina and spiritual energy, too. Good chance, Jun Changshao said.
Chapter 289. Young Master Linfeng is tired. The Great Spirit Gathering Seal is an ultimate martial art technique. Even Wuzong consumes a lot of spiritual energy to use it, let alone a martial artist. I can only hope that the Iron Bone disciple is also exhausted. While everyone was talking, Xiao Ziji rushed over with the cloud-treading steps, using exploding fist and mountain-splitting palm to launch an airtight attack. You're tired? Sorry, I just got into the zone. Boom. 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 Because of the severe consumption of spiritual energy, Qin Linfeng could barely defend himself, but he was definitely at a disadvantage. Everyone's mouth twitched when they saw this. Are the disciples of the Iron Bone sect even human? They're still so energetic even after taking 2 palm strikes. Elder Jean screamed in his heart, "Hold on, you must hold on." Back in the Haoqi sect, Alliance Master Qin had also cried out in his heart when he saw his disciples being defeated one after another. And the result? Those who should be defeated were defeated, and those who should be defeated were defeated. It didn't affect the battle at all. Bang! 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 Xiao Ziji's punches were faster, and his power was as strong as ever. The more he fought, the smoother his muscles and spiritual energy became. The more he fought, the more his blood boiled. He felt it, but Qin Linfeng couldn't catch it at all. He could only use his body to receive the storm-like punches. Bang! In the end, he flew out like a cannonball. In the process, the 2 Great Spirit Gathering seals that were pushed into the sky gradually disappeared into nothingness as they lost contact with their masters. Boom! Qin Linfeng crashed into the stone wall in front of the hall, and his whole body sank into it. Wah! Blood splattered. He tried to raise his head and said weakly, "You're really strong," then he fainted. His scarred body fell from the groove and landed on the ground with a thud. Phew! Xiao Ziji stabilized his body and stopped attacking. He cupped his fists at the unconscious Qin Linfeng and said, "Thank you." He turned around and left the martial arts field. During this time, he didn't look at Murong Xian, as if she didn't exist. This battle was for the Iron Bone sect. Xiao Ziji would never win against the Sacred Spring sect's disciple and show off to that woman. 2 years later, in the Lily Holy sect. When I was showing off in front of you and your fellow disciples. After the battle ended, a notification sounded in Jun Changxiao's ears. Ding! He defeated 13 direct disciples of the Sacred Spring sect. Comfortable. He was comfortable, but Elder Jean was on the verge of tears. My Sacred Spring sect's personal disciple used all his trump cards. Not only did he not win the battle, he was also knocked unconscious. This is too much of a bully. As a martial arts master, Qin Linfeng was truly powerful. Unfortunately, he ran into Xiao Ziji.
Although this fellow had only cultivated for a little more than a year, in terms of body tempering, he could be called a monster. Using the Grand Spirit Gathering seal to hurt him, unless one's level was high and one's comprehension was strong. Of course. If his opponent had been Yixingchen, Qin Linfeng would have been defeated long ago. This was because the former's overall strength was greater than Xiao Ziji's. The various forces cultivators gaped, looking at the retreating Xiao Ziji as if they were looking at a monster. To be able to take 2 Great Spirit Gathering seals head-on, and still be able to push them out and launch a fierce attack. In the end, he was able to leave the stage so easily. Just how strong was his physical body to be able to do this? Terrifying. Ma Yinting said in shock. If he were to fight a genius like Qin Linfeng, even if he could win, he would have to pay a huge price. Xiao Ziji's battle not only won glory for the Iron Bone clan, but also proved that he was no longer the trash he was 5 years ago. He believed that the news would spread to the Azure Sun County and the Xiao family. They would definitely not feel good, and the ridicule from the outside world would be even more intense. Let's not worry about the Xiao family first. Let's talk about Alliance leader Qin and the Alliance's big shots. When Qin Linfeng was defeated, they were all speechless. Their expressions were as ugly as if they had eaten feces. The Sacred Spring sect's inner and outer disciples had been defeated one after another, and they had been slapped in the face countless times. Now that Xiao Ziji had defeated a direct disciple, they felt as if their souls had been slapped away. Watching a joke. Why don't you laugh? No one was more shocked than Murong Xian. He had used his strong physical body to resist Qin Linfeng's trump card and won fair and square. In this year. What kind of terrifying cultivation did he go through to be so strong? Looking at the back of the leaving figure, Murong Xian thought of all kinds of terrifying training grounds. This man was gritting his teeth and cultivating. Xian heir, Xiao family Xiao Ziji has good talent and is also very hardworking. Don't blame Grandpa for making the decision to marry you. When she was young, Grandpa Murong's words rang in her ears. At that time, Murong Xian replied, "Grandpa, what does that person look like?" Xian heir has never seen him before. How can you casually get engaged? Grandpa Murong laughed. Grandpa has already checked that kid. He has great potential and will definitely become a dragon among men in the future. He is worthy of you. As long as he is not a worm among men. At that time, Murong Xian obeyed Grandpa Murong, who loved her dearly. As she grew up, she wanted freedom and broke off the engagement. Today, Xiao Ziji defeated Qin Linfeng. This made her realize that Grandpa Murong was right. He really did have potential. That senior sister said indifferently, the Sacred Spring sect's direct disciples are really weak. They can't even deal with a 7th-rate sect's disciple. Can senior sister beat him? Murong Xian's words made the senior sister silent. Although she was also a 6th-grade martial master, she was only a high-level one. If even Qin Linfeng was defeated, it would be very difficult for her to fight Xiao Ziji. Senior sister said, "I can't win, but junior sister can." She was only an inner disciple of the Lily Holy Sect. Murong Xian was the direct disciple of the 11th elder. She was much better than her. Elder Jean. Jun Changshao said, "Does your sect have any direct disciples?" Humph! Elder Jean snorted, "My Sacred Springs sect has more direct disciples than your Iron Bone inner disciples." He could lose the battle, but he couldn't lose his momentum. "Then let's fight again." Jun Changshao waved his hand and Tian Qi walked out. Although his cultivation was the lowest among the inner disciples, his eyes were filled with pride. Without the Iron Bone clan, he was just a medicinal ingredient in the eyes of others. Now that he was standing in front of the Sacred Springs sect and facing their direct disciple, he was happy and proud. Elder Jean sent out the second direct disciple. That person was called Ran Hui. Although his aptitude was only high grade, he was a 7th grade martial master. Supreme grade spiritual roots were not easy to find, so many direct disciples of the sect mostly had high grade spiritual roots. Tian Qi. Jun Changshao transmitted his voice, "Your opponent is a bit strong. Do your best and don't disappoint me and the other sect members." "Okay." Tian Qi replied with his voice transmission technique. The two reported their names, and the referee immediately announced, "Begin." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the burly Ran Hui threw a heavy punch. Thump! Thump! Tian Qi crossed his arms to block, and his body retreated more than 10 steps. He instantly judged that his opponent's strength was at least 80,000 Jin. If he wanted to win against him with only 60,000 Jin of strength and continue to win for the Iron Bone, it would be a fierce battle. Ah! Tian Qi used cloud-treading steps and exploding fist to rush forward. Sect leader. This disciple is ready to fight for the sect at any time. Chapter 290. Boom! There was a loud noise in the training field. Tian Qi, who was weaker than Ran Hui, was sent flying again. He struggled to stabilize himself at the edge of the field and smiled. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had exchanged dozens of blows since the start of the battle. The 4th grade Iron Bone disciple was at a disadvantage. He had been hit many times, but he did not fall down. How did he train his body? Tian Qi was also an advanced martial master, but he was 3 levels behind Ran Hui. Even with the help of martial arts, it was difficult to suppress him. But don't forget. He had been training in the Experience Tower. Although he was not as strong as Xiao Ziji and the others, his body was not weak. Ran Hui could attack him, but it was impossible to hurt him in a short period of time. Any disciple who had trained on the first floor of the Experience Tower had one advantage, which was that they were very resistant to beatings. Let's see how long you can hold on. Ran Hui rushed over again. His fist, which was condensed with spiritual power, was thrown. Tian Qi could not dodge. He could only adjust his position slightly and take the attack with his arms. He retreated to the other side so that he would not be hit out of the field. Whoosh! Whoosh! Boom! 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 Ran Hui caught up with him and attacked like a storm. Dense fist shadows flashed in the training field. The airwaves came one after another. The higher-ups of the Sacred Springs sect felt a little relieved. Since the start of the battle, this was the first time a disciple had suppressed an Iron Bone disciple. Although the opponent was struggling, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Indeed. It was a matter of time. But the key was how long it would take. Boom! 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 Ran Hui was still attacking crazily. Tian Qi could only defend and retreat again and again. This is a little troublesome, Ma Yinting said. Wang Donglin said, the Sacred Springs sect is a sect with a strong foundation. Its direct disciples are very strong. It is reasonable that the Iron Bone disciple can't hold on and lose. They had won more than 60 rounds. It was not important to lose one. Wrong. Tian Qi, who was defending, did not want to lose. He wanted to continue winning for the Iron Bone disciples in front of the sect leader and his fellow disciples. Boom! Ran Hui finished another set of 36 paths to heaven punches and beat Tian Qi to the edge of the training field. Then he chased after him. Swish! Swish! 7 Fields steadied his body and used cloud-treading steps to avoid the opponent's attack and leave the danger zone. Damn it! Ran Hui turned around and chased after him, once again launching a bombardment of heavenly flowers, the fury in his eyes growing more and more intense. His strength was clearly stronger than his, but after exchanging more than 100 blows, let alone knocking him down, he couldn't even get off the stage. This was really infuriating. Boom! Tian Qi suffered another violent bombardment. Although he could still stand on the martial arts practice field, it was hard for him to suppress a mouthful of blood. I can't. If the Iron Bone disciples don't lose, I'll eat shit. I've been on the defensive from the very beginning, unable to retaliate at all. The martial artists of the various forces began to discuss. In fact, this was what they wanted to see. In the end, the Iron Bone sect had been suppressing the Sacred Springs sect for more than 60 matches. Alliance Master Qin, I think the Iron Bone disciples will lose, right? The leader of the Long Blade Martial School asked cautiously. The Sacred Springs sect's disciples were defeated one after another, so he didn't dare to gloat easily, lest the result would be a slap to his face. Qin Haoran said indifferently, they are beaten to the point that they can't even fight back. If they can win, then the sun will rise from the west. Shentong and the leaders of the alliance couldn't help but laugh. The Sacred Springs sect had lost so many matches. Even if they really won one, it didn't matter. But they could find joy and laughter from it. They were really a group of hopeless idiots. Boom! Boom! Ran Hui and Tian Qi had been fighting for more than 10 minutes. The scene was still one attacking and the other defending. There was no change at all. However, the spectating martial artists were speechless. The Iron Bone disciples could still stand firm after being beaten for so long. They were really resistant to beatings. However, defending also consumed psionic energy. If they continued to fight, they would definitely lose, and even lose miserably. However, they ignored a problem. Defending would consume psionic energy, but attacking would also consume psionic energy, and even more. Ran Hui attacked again and again, and the power condensed in his fist had obviously decreased by a lot. It's about time for Tian Qi to counterattack. Jun Changshao murmured. Sure enough. After Tian Qi felt that the opponent's power had decreased, he relied on cloud steps to occasionally receive attacks and counterattack to probe. Until he was sure that the opponent had consumed a lot of psionic energy, he no longer hid and defended, but launched a real counterattack. Whoosh whoosh. Bursting fist on the left fist, mountain-splitting palm on the right fist. Relying on the speed of cloud steps, he launched a crazy attack. Boom! 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 This! Everyone was dumbfounded. The Iron Bone disciple had been beaten for so long, but he still had the strength to launch a powerful counterattack. Ran Hui, who was used to having the advantage, was caught off guard by Tian Qi's sudden counterattack. He could only keep retreating. Tian Qi seized the opportunity. The remaining psionic energy in the cyclone exploded, turning from passive to active, and began to launch a fierce attack. Ran Hui, who had consumed a lot of energy, couldn't take it anymore and could only turn to defense. However, was his physical body as resistant as Tian Qi? The answer was no. Therefore, after a huge consumption, he suffered the power of the punches and was instantly beaten back. He was originally suppressing the opponent, but in the end, he was suppressed by the opponent. The battle style suddenly changed. I can't lose, I have to win. This was the only thought in Tian Qi's mind, driving him to condense psionic energy and continue to attack. At that moment, he seemed to have gone crazy. When he felt that all the psionic energy in his body had been consumed, when his physical body was in intense pain, Tian Chi stopped and gasped for breath. As for Ran Hui, he had already fainted on the ground from the beating. His exposed skin was covered with dense, bright red fist marks. Senior brother Tian won. Lu Wanshi shouted. The Iron Bone disciples also cheered in high spirits. They had originally come to cheer, but their senior brother had won the previous dozens of matches too easily. They only cheered 2 or 3 times before gradually calming down and facing it. This match was different. Their senior brother had turned defeat into victory with great difficulty, so they had to cheer and celebrate. Hearing his fellow disciples cheering for him and celebrating for him, Tian Chi's lips curled into a smile. Then, he endured the pain and dragged his weak body down the stage. He would walk down the stage the same way he walked up. It was only a distance of a few dozen meters, but Tian Chi seemed to have walked for a long time. He stopped in front of Jun Changshao and said, "Sect Master, this disciple did not disappoint you." Before he finished speaking, intense pain and weakness instantly surged into his heart, making it difficult for him to support himself. His body fell straight down. Junior brother. Su Xiaoma was the first to rush over. Tian Chi was too tired. He was so tired that he could not even open his eyes. Before he fainted, there was still a smile on his lips. He said weakly, I won, you won." Jun Changshao said seriously, everyone saw it. Although Tian Chi had walked down the stage and fainted after defeating Ran Hui, who was also a high-level martial artist, he had explained to the world what it meant to be unyielding and unyielding. The Iron Bone Unyielding Sect. This name might be unpleasant to hear, and it might be a tongue twister. But with Tian Chi's proof, it represented a spirit that would never admit defeat and never admit defeat. Chapter 291. Tian Chi defeated Ran Hui with difficulty. Not only did he defend the sect's winning streak, but he also proved that he had the strength to fight against a direct disciple of the Sacred Springs sect even though he was at the bottom of the inner sect. However, the price was that he fainted. The main reason was that he was suppressed too badly in the early stages, and he fought back in the later stages to win. If Tian Chi also had a top-grade spiritual root, even if his cultivation was lower than Ran Hui's, he wouldn't have won with such difficulty. Senior brother's victory made the Iron Bone disciples even more proud. Tian Chi's reversal also made the other sects silent. A 4th-grade martial master could defeat a 7th-grade martial master. This was definitely not a fluke, but a reflection of his strength. The Iron Bone clan was really strong. At this moment, no one doubted this 7th-grade sect anymore. Because the Sacred Springs sect's disciples were defeated one by one, it was enough to prove themselves. They used to think if the Iron Bone clan could win a match. Now, the tables had turned. Could the Sacred Springs sect win a match? As for Qin Haran and the Alliance sect, let's not talk about these idiots because it would only spoil the fun. Sect leader Jun looked at a cultivator and said indifferently, "My disciple has won this battle. Please go to the outhouse now." Why would he go to the outhouse? Eat shit. It was the same as cutting a penis or eating a keyboard. Jun Changshao naturally wouldn't let him go. Instead, he looked at Elder Jin and cupped his hands. Your Sacred Springs sect lost again. Do you still want to fight? Fight. Elder Jin said angrily. He couldn't maintain the demeanor of a 5th-grade sect's upper echelon anymore. The muscles on his face were almost distorted from anger. Li Fei. Jun Changshao said, "Let's fight." Yes. Li Fei tiptoed and walked towards the martial arts arena. However, he also looked back at the unconscious Tian Chi in thought, Senior brother Tian, Li Fei, will continue to defend the sect's winning streak. The Sacred Springs sect sent another 7th-grade martial master as a direct disciple. As for the name, it was needless to say because after the match started, he was played around by Li Fei who was running at full speed. What a fast speed! The Sacred Springs sect's disciple can't catch up. Looking at the situation, it doesn't look good. Everyone started to worry about the Sacred Spring Sect's disciple. This was a change in mentality. This was proof that the Iron Bone faction was strong. Boom! Boom! After circling around for a while, Li Fei mysteriously appeared behind his opponent. His golden right leg carried with it spiritual energy as he directly kicked his opponent's neck twice. Thump! Thump! The disciple staggered to the side. During this process, Li Fei once again appeared in front of him. With a tap of his toes, he leapt into the air and shouted, "Iron Bone Shadowless Kick." Bang! 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 Pooh! After a torrential barrage of attacks, the disciple retreated to the edge of the martial arts practice field. Blood spurted out, and then his eyelids rolled back and he fell straight down. Plop! His body landed on the ground, leaving the training field. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched. This direct disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect didn't even make a move. He didn't even touch the corner of the Iron Bone disciple's clothes. Ding! Defeated the personal disciple of the Sacred Spring Sect. Epic mission completion rate, 90%. The host has received 600 contribution points. Ding! Contribution value, 2505200 points. Ding! Before the notification overflowed, Jun Changshao opened the shop and spent 1,000 contribution points to buy 20 bottles of aptitude-changing liquid. He had already saved 30 bottles. After the challenge, he would definitely distribute them to the disciples who fought. I still need 10% more. I should continue to challenge the direct disciples. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and said, "Elder Jin, do you still want to fight?" Fight! Elder Jin gritted his teeth and said. Right now, he was like a gambler who had lost all his fortune in a casino. He had completely lost his mind. Jun Changshao said, "I still have 4 disciples who haven't fought. How about another 4? Sure. Elder Jin said. As he said that, he waved his hand. A tall and strong disciple stepped out. Although he was also a 7th grade martial master, he was obviously stronger than the previous 2. Little Mo, go on stage. Yes. Su Xiaoma handed the unconscious Tian Qi to Xiao Ziji. Swinging his arms, he tiptoed onto the stage. After announcing his name, the battle began. Boom! Boom! Su Xiaoma used the cloud-treading steps and circled around the tall disciple of the Holy Spring Sect. Then, he continuously attacked his vital points. Unsurprisingly. Although the big guy's skin was rough and his flesh was thick, after a series of wild kicks, he fell to the ground like a small hill. Su Xiaoma clapped his hands and raised his eyebrows, no difficulty. Everyone was about to faint. These disciples of the Iron Bone Sect were simply too scary. Torturing the direct disciples of the Holy Spring Sect was like playing around. Next match. Li Qingyang fought. As a well-rounded person, he could easily win even against Qing Linfeng. Therefore, it only took him a few minutes to defeat his opponent. Ding! Disciple defeated direct disciple 55 of the Holy Spring Sect, meeting the hidden criteria. Epic mission completion rate is 100%. Host has received 200 contribution points. Ding! Sect contribution points, 1705200. Strange? Jun Changshao was puzzled. All 3 missions have met the requirements and reached 100%. Why hasn't the epic mission been completed yet? Sect leader Jun. While thinking, Elder Jin said with an ugly expression, "Please wait a moment, my Holy Spring Sect still has 2 direct disciples in seclusion. I have already sent someone to inform them." Oh. Jun Changshao replied. The 2 direct disciples in seclusion must be Gu Chaojiu and Jian Fifan. The Holy Spring Sect only has a total of 7 direct disciples. Now that 5 have already fought, it must be the 2 of them. These 2 are the core disciples of the Holy Spring Sect. It is said that one has a sacred grade aptitude, and the other is a rare sword cultivator. Their strength is also extraordinary. Everyone discussed in low voices. A sacred grade aptitude and a sword cultivator. Jun Changshao held his chin and said, "It's a little tricky." Sect leader. Lu Qianqian said, "Leave the sacred grade aptitude to me." Zhou Hong said, "Sect leader, that sword cultivator, this disciple hopes to fight against him." "Sure." Jun Changshao said. He was still very confident in these two disciples. After all, one was also a sacred grade aptitude, and the other was also a sword cultivator. Not long after, two disciples in the Holy Spring Sect uniform walked out from the inner yard. One of them had a lazy look, giving people the feeling that he did not care about his appearance. The other had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, exuding a cold aura. From their temperament, Jun Changshao could also recognize that the one on the left must be the sacred grade aptitude Gu Chaozhou, and the one on the right must be the sword cultivator Jian Fifan. There were so many good seedlings in the Holy Spring Sect. Including Qing Lin Feng, if the three of them joined the Iron Bones Sect and were trained by him, their strength and realm would definitely skyrocket. Sigh. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, "It's a bit of a waste of talent to stay in the Holy Spring Sect." Elder. Gu Chaozhou walked over and said with a sleepy look, "This Iron Bone came to challenge us. Did he have to call the two of us out?" Everyone's mouth twitched. He probably did not know that his sect had already lost 70 rounds, and it was a terrible loss. Jian Fifan did not say anything. He instinctively looked at Zhou Hong opposite him, his dark eyes shining with a strong fighting spirit. "Elder." He walked to the martial arts practice field and said, "I'll fight first." "Sect leader, I'd like to fight." Before Jun Changshao could answer, Zhou Hong had already walked out. Ta! The two stood in the middle of the martial arts practice field at the same time, staring at each other. Instantly, an extremely sharp aura appeared around them. This is sword intent. That Iron Bone disciple is also a sword cultivator. Everyone opened their eyes wide. Previously, there was a sword cultivator, and now there was a sword cultivator. Iron Bone's level was not high, but there were all kinds of warriors. Iron Bone Sect disciple, Zhou Hong. Holy Spring Sect disciple, Jian Fifan. After the two sword cultivators reported their names, the sword intent gathered in the martial arts practice field became more intense. The warriors closer to them were so shocked that they took a few steps back. Chapter 292. Zhou Hong and Jian Fifan were only a few meters away from each other. The sword intent they released began to fight, which shocked everyone and made them retreat. A swordsman was indeed a swordsman. He was indeed different. Many martial artists envied him. Swords were commonly used weapons. If one became a swordsman, one's status would skyrocket. Unfortunately, the requirements to become a swordsman were too harsh. Not everyone could become one. Even with the system, sect leader Jun, who was like a cheat, had to be a martial artist without the talent to become a swordsman. Although Yi Xingqian, who was reborn as the Great Emperor, practiced the Ling Jian divine technique, he was still a martial artist. He was not a swordsman at all. Begin. The referee shouted. Zhou Hong and Jian Fifan were still looking at each other. After a while, they took 10 steps back at the same time to keep a sufficient distance from each other. They did not release their aura or spiritual energy. They just looked at each other as if the scene was frozen. Jun Changshao's mouth twitched. Here it comes. When he accepted Zhou Hong into the sect, he thought that the scene of a swordsman and a swordsman fighting would be boring. It would be even more boring. Show your sword, Zhou Hong said. Jian Fifan said, my sword will only be unsheathed when I make a move. Make your move. Once I make a move, my sword will definitely bleed. So I'll make the first move. In a fight with a swordsman, I like to let my opponent make the first move. Why? Because I can measure the strength of my opponent and whether it's worth it for me to make the first move. Everyone's mouth twitched. You two are in a fight. Can you stop chatting and start fighting? We're all tired. They're getting impatient. Zhou Hong said, they must want us to fight as soon as possible. Jian Fifan said, they don't understand that the conversation between you and me is actually a contest. Jun Changshao could not stand it anymore. He wanted to send an emoji of, is this the world of swordsmen, to express his breaking down mood. Clang! Zhou Hong finally unsheathed his sword and said, a swordsman is destined to be lonely if the world doesn't understand. I agree, Jian Fifan said. Zhou Hong held his sword with one hand and said, I'll make my move. Please, Jian Fifan said. Whoosh! Whoosh! Shwa! Zhou Hong took a step forward and waved his quaint longsword in the air. Beams of sword light shot out instantly. So fast! The experts of the various sects exclaimed. Even though they had been watching without blinking, they were still unable to catch how many times Zhou Hong had struck out with his sword in a single breath. Jian Fifan noticed it and was shocked. He had actually struck 60 times in a single breath, which was a full 30 times more than him. This was definitely some kind of profound sword technique. Clang! While he was thinking, Jian Fifan waved his hand and a 1-meter-long sword appeared out of thin air. Then, he slashed out streaks of unparalleled sword chi in the void. Ding! 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 The two sword chis collided, and a crisp sound was heard, as if they were intertwined into beautiful music. The sword chi was completely neutralized, and the two of them were still standing in the same place. Zhou Hong said, you attacked twice. Jian Fifan smiled bitterly and said, you have too much sword chi. I can only attack once more. Sword force. Zhou Hong turned his wrist and said, graceful. The sword was unsheathed, and the light of the sword flashed. Swoosh! The unparalleled sword chi attacked Jian Fifan with a cold aura. It was much stronger than when he used it in Death Valley. Li Qingyang and the others were getting stronger. Zhou Hong, who had been comprehending the sword all this while, would be crazy if he did not make any progress. Swoosh! Facing the incoming sword chi, Jian Fifan held his sword with both hands and slashed from top to bottom, shouting, rainbow pierces the sun. Swoosh! The sword chi burst out. Boom! The two sword chis collided, and a cold gust of wind blew, causing everyone's faces to hurt as if they were cut by knives. Although these two sword cultivators talked a lot of nonsense, the sword intent that burst out when they really fought was so terrifying. The second time they fought, they were evenly matched. Zhou Hong bent down slightly, and his slightly weathered face was cold and stern. Huff huff. In an instant, an aura similar to spirit energy appeared around him, and the leaves that were blown by the wind were cut on the spot. The stone slab that was shaken off by the fight between Xiao Ziji and Qing Linfeng was also cut into small pieces. Jian Fifan frowned and sheathed his sword, saying, you won. Ah! Everyone was dumbfounded. From the looks of the situation, no one could do anything to the other. Why did he surrender? Only Yixingchen knew that the sword force that Zhou Hong released was actually the second move of the Ling Jian God Technique two-word force technique. He had only practiced the Ling Jian God Technique for less than a year, and he had already comprehended the second move. Clang! Zhou Hong sheathed his sword and said, thank you for letting me win. He wanted to have a good fight with Jian Fifan, but at this moment, he was representing Iron Bone, so he had to win the fight. Jian Fifan put his sword into the space ring and said, if there is a chance in the future, I will go to Iron Bone and have a good taste of your sword moves. You are always welcome. Zhou Hong said. Everyone collapsed. You two talked a lot of nonsense and ended the fight in less than a minute. It was too fucked up. This was the battle between sword cultivators. Once to a certain extent, unless it was a life and death battle, there was no need to continue fighting. Not to mention, Zhou Hong was stronger than Jian Fifan in terms of sword force, and he used the second move of the Ling Jian God Technique. The latter could not take the sword move and would die under the sword. It was not a life-and-death battle, so why put him in a dead end? The battle between sword cultivators ended with Iron Bone's victory. The Sacred Springs sect would definitely be injured. After all, they had lost another battle. Qiao Zhou. Elder Jean said with a trembling voice, "This is the last battle, we must win." Got it, got it. Gu Chaozhou scratched his head and walked lazily to the martial arts practice field. Qianqian, go. Jun Changshao said. Lu Qianqian touched the bracelet he gave her and went to the martial arts practice field. This last battle is usually the finale. Iron Bone actually sent a female disciple. They won too many matches and disrespected the Sacred Spring sect. In my opinion, maybe they are going easy on the fifth-rate sect. After all, they have lost 71 matches. Everyone whispered. Gu Chaozhou was startled and said to himself, "Our Sacred Springs sect has lost 71 matches. No wonder the elder and his fellow disciples looked so bad." Gu Chaozhou, who had been a little sloppy, immediately straightened his body. His gaze became sharp, as if he was a different person. "Mississippi," he said seriously, "although you are a woman, I will not go easy on you for the sect's glory." Lu Qianqian stopped and said calmly, "Iron Bone Clan's disciple, Lu Qianqian. Sacred Spring sect's disciple, Gu Chaozhou." After the two of them said their names, the referee shouted, "Begin." Ka ka ka, in an instant, cold air whizzed out of Lu Qianqian's body. Wherever it passed, the ground was quickly frozen. "Damn!" Gu Chaozhou said in shock, "Ice element martial artist. 9 layers of ice sealing palm." Lu Qianqian raised her right hand that was wearing the ice bracelet, and an even more powerful cold current swept over. "Oh no!" Gu Chaozhou's expression changed. He was about to use his movement technique to escape, but his speed was slowed down by the cold air. Frost gradually covered his entire face. Just as this direct disciple with a divine spiritual root was about to speak, his entire body was affected by the frenzied cold current. He immediately took a step forward and ran before he turned into a lifelike ice sculpture. Whoosh! Lu Qianqian waved her long sleeves. Dense spiritual energy swept out and pushed him onto the ice on the ground. He slipped out of the arena. Everyone almost fell down. Ka ka ka. After a few breaths, Gu Chaozhou was unfrozen. He was so cold that he held his shoulders and sneezed. His nose was running down. Elder Jean. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and said, "Sorry, my disciple won again."